like you and also have the same thoughts and prayers as you? Are you finding that there are some people that just need to be helped, that need to be saved from themselves, like you? Come to the American Readout. The same thoughts and prayers as you. There's a future for you. Right here in the American Readout. Prayers as you. Right past the border of Canada. And right past that just the border of Washington. Come to the American Readout. Enjoy the vistas. Enjoy the lack of diversity. Enjoy the oppression. It's yours to wield as you wish in the Readout. For far too long, we've watched these beautiful visions of patriotism being snuffed out by windmills. These treacherous windmills ruthlessly taking the life of these majestic patriots. How could we stand by and let all this happen? We needed to do something. A change had to come. Luckily, a man showed up. A man showed up and saved the Eagles. And that man's name was Donald J. Trump. In 2016, the savior of this symbol of America came. And all of a sudden, the eagle population was on the rise again. Never in the history of the world has anybody ever seen such population growth. This man truly was sent by a higher power to grow this population of American symbolism, to bring all of these like-minded, white-headed eagles together, to grow when they were once shrinking. These white-headed patriots found themselves flourishing with this guy. Fucking hilarious. Yo, what's going on, everybody? We will, I got so much to do. We're going to cut the intro short. Anybody that misses this part, it's not that big a deal. Today, what we're going to do with Murder Monday and JonBenet Ramsey, case of the 6-year-old beauty queen, which is weird to say, that was murdered in her home in Boulder in 1996, just after Christmas. It has been unsolved now for 27 years, and somewhat recently, they have a cold case group re-looking at the file. Not so much reinvestigating, but looking to see if they should reinvestigate, I believe. I could be wrong about that. So we've been looking at this for a while. You can see a bunch of the other live streams on our Murder Mondays. We have a number of these left. It's not going to go on forever, but we still have a bunch of stuff that I want to cover. Today, what we're going to look at is a lot of how the media framed the Ramsey family. And that between the Boulder police and the media, that's a lot of why this case hasn't been solved. And some of that resides in the media's willingness to accept narratives from cops immediately and unquestioningly. Not saying that everybody did it, but that's even in today's world, that tends to happen. Police put out a statement. Hey, what's up? Police put out a statement, and that statement goes directly to the media. The media covers it unquestioningly. And then eventually, if it wasn't real, it starts to unravel. Perfect example of that is Uvalde. So when it comes to the Ramseys, they've been, when you look at Karen Arndt or Linda Arndt, Detective Crazy Eyes, you can see that she claims from within like minutes of the body being discovered, she immediately know John Ramsey is the killer. I mean, few things can give you a bias more obviously than that. So I want to show you a press conference that was had about a polygraph that the Ramseys had. Now, they wouldn't do a polygraph with the police. Frankly, I don't blame them. But there's really a silly, it's all in my mind. If you're going to take a polygraph that your own people administer and you're the one who chooses to put it out, that one's hard to take also. So we know polygraphs aren't admissible in court because all they are is a fucking tool to check if certain vital signs react during certain questions. It's not exact of a science, a lot like handwriting isn't exact as a science. And you'll see as we go through some of this stuff how the media chooses what is important and what should be dismissed, and how sometimes they will use even the people to dismiss one thing and assert another when those two things are like identical. So we'll see some examples of the media bias and how between the police and the media, they're a big part of why this hasn't been solved. So here's a press conference that John and Patsy had with Lynn Wood and others. Oh, my bad.
Here are the questions Dr. Edward Gelb asked John Ramsey on the
so close. Only a seconds.
John Ramsey was telling the truth.
That was the conclusion. Here are the questions Dr. Edward Gelb asked John Ramsey on the polygraph about whether he was involved in the murder of his daughter.
Did you inflict any of the injuries that caused the death of JonBenet? Answer, no. Regarding JonBenet, did you inflict any of the injuries that caused her death? Answer, no. Were those injuries that resulted in JonBenet's death inflicted by you? Answer, no.
These are the questions he asked John Ramsey about whether he knew who killed his daughter.
Do you know for sure who killed John?
I don't like the for sure because look, I a lot of what I did in my life is using surveys and asking questions to get answers. The most reputable yeah, no, I mean, even with that, I'm not questioning who they hired, like that they hired the famous guy that's known for bullshit. But just the science of it in itself and choosing to do it, it's just, I don't know. It's very, whether it's accurate or not, it's just very PR appearing from the outside.
JonBenet. Answer, no.
And saying, do you know for sure who killed JonBenet is an interesting way to ask that question. Because if you ask, do you believe you know? Well, I believe I know, but I'm not sure. So it is an interesting way to ask that question. Between having courses in college, designing surveys, and doing a lot of coaching and having to ask questions of business owners to get them, and churches for that matter, to get them to a place where they can accept the answers they're going to give. Patsy did have to take it 3 times, but that's not because she failed. It's because they could not get it. See, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying there's anything nefarious. I'm just saying it's framed the way they want it. They did it themselves. And if it went horrible, they didn't have to put it out.
Regarding JonBenet, do you know for sure who killed her? Answer, no. Are you concealing the identity of the person who killed JonBenet? Answer, no.
Patsy Ramsey was asked the same series of questions, and according to Dr. Gelb, she was not lying.
Based on the numerical scoring of the examinations in this series, Patsy Ramsey was telling the truth.
But she was also asked one other series of questions about the murder.
Did you write the ransom note that was found in your house? Answer, no. Regarding the ransom note, did you write it? Answer, no. Is that your handwriting on the ransom note found in your house? Answer, no. Conclusion. Patsy Ramsey was telling the truth.
Why did the Ramseys...
Well, so here's where I stand with the Ramseys and the crime. I have no prediction of who did the crime. I have predictions of who didn't do the crime. The Ramseys did not do this. It just makes no sense. Could they be not revealing things that they do know for reasons I don't know? Absolutely. Always possible. Can I make logical sense of all of their actions? Like 95%, I can't. Can I understand? I cannot understand how the public can rationally, in any way, believe that this family did this. Which also leads me to believe I cannot understand in any rational way how the police believe they did this. Because any reason that they have for it being the Ramseys, you could say is the exact same reason it would be the parents. I mean, be the police. Like, it is as nonsensical to say, we think Patsy Ramsey woke up, got mad, shoved her daughter. The damage was so big, but nobody could notice it. And then to cover it up, they mastermind a torture killing in their own home. They also mastermind a practice note and then another note. They were able to get their DNA off of absolutely everything and stage the perfect crime, all from an accident. Because the police would say, we know that nobody broke into the house, because who would break into a house, do this to a girl, then write a kidnapping letter and leave? Well, why is that any more unrealistic than what you're claiming the Ramseys did? You're claiming they panicked, and so they staged the sexual assault and murder and wrote a fucking weird 3-page kidnapping. Like, if they wanted to stage a kidnapping, why wouldn't they just say, we have your daughter, get this money, we'll call you? Why would they write a long letter if nobody else would write a long letter? Like, you make these, nobody's ever written a letter like that. So they're like really super criminal masterminds, because in the panic, they decided we need to throw off the cops. And so we're going to, like, it's just so dumb. What's up, Joseph? There are situations where I'd refuse a polygraph test. Absolutely. I'm stupid that I took a field sobriety test because they suspected me of smoking weed. I could have just said, no, there's nothing they could do. They can't, like, fucking, what are they going to blood test you? Like, that was dumb.
Have a news conference? Here's what Patsy Ramsey says about why and law enforcement.
I wish they would open their eyes and their minds and their hearts and know that we did not kill our daughter, and that a killer walks the streets of this country, and we need to be looking for that person. As long as there is a killer at large who has murdered our child, our lives will never go on. I mean,
they lied about no footprints in the show. There was no, snow, right. And no signs of forced entry. Yeah, Linda Arndt says, I knew it was them. There were no signs of forced entry. You knew on the day before crime scene did anything that there was no forced entry. And you know that with the same certainty that the kid wasn't in the house because you didn't find it. Like you didn't find the fucking child. So why would you find that they broke in? Like there were no obvious marks of break-in. So it had to be an inside job. And that is literally the crux of where the media starts too.
That is just ridiculous.
Someone killed this 6-year-old child. We know that, and we want them captured.
The reason I took it is that's when Live PD was still on, and I watched them tests every day. I knew word for word what he was going to say to me. And the funny thing is I passed all the tests, and he still tried to fail me on some sort of eye thing when he put the pen in the fucking light. And his, like, higher up was like, are you kidding? Go ahead, sir. Wait, what happened to the audio? What happened to the audio? Oh.
What was I thinking? I had JonBenet's face for that person. As long as there is a killer at large who has murdered our child, our lives will never go on. I mean, that is just ridiculous.
Someone killed this 6-year-old child. We know that, and we want them captured.
Oh, the sound did go off.
From the moment I went into that room, and I just kept saying, this is for you, honey.
Accuracy, honesty, and mistrust were the themes during the Ramsey news conference in Atlanta.
We have, as Lynn said, not 1 ounce of trust in the Boulder police, and that's sad. I wish that we did.
What?
I mean, I can't blame him. Look, if somebody wanted to jail me, why would I cooperate with them?
Are the chances that 2 separate individuals would take a series of 5 polygraph examinations and pass them all?
Why would you need 5? Why is that? That's more weird to me than beneficial.
And yet be lying? You're going to find that it's somewhere between 4 in 1,000.
Hey, if we hit that like button, there's a better chance this case gets solved.
And 1 in 1 trillion.
The Ramseys were asked groups of questions. If they killed their...
Yes, you are absolutely right. Not only 100%, but actually 1,000%.
daughter, did they know who did? Patsy Ramsey was also asked another series of questions, whether she wrote the ransom note. According to the polygraph examiner, the Ramseys answered no to all of those questions.
Okay, next.
All right, Jane, it's been more than 3 years now
Brian
since the brutal
Gumble.
murder of JonBenet Ramsey. Yet her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, are still trying to fight widespread suspicions they were somehow involved in her death. In an attempt to support their claims, the Ramseys, who have consistently refused to take lie detector tests for investigators, recently submitted to voluntary lie detector tests that were set up by their attorney, who publicly announced the results on Thursday as he chastised public suspicions.
These people have been on trial.
My God, what happened to you, buddy? Buddy, you don't even have a law license anymore.
In the court of public opinion.
If the legal industry was the military, you'd have been dishonorably discharged.
For over 3 years, but they have never been charged with a crime. A grand jury met for months and did not find the evidence sufficient to indict them.
See, that's a lie. Is he lying or does he not know? He's lying, right? Like, he's doing a liar McLiarstein, right?
Yet the leaks and the lies have persisted. Books written, television shows, movies, putting these people on trial every day, convicting them of a crime they did not commit every night.
Frank Horvath's a criminal justice professor at Michigan State University and an expert on polygraph tests. He's in Okemos, Washington. Mr. Horvath, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
Professor, first off, this is...
Now he thinks he's Jesus. Very well done. Nice one, Saul.
...inadmissible as evidence. As a general rule, how fallible are these kinds of polygraph tests?
Well, in my opinion,
here's an interesting thing. Thanksgiving of 2020, the worst blunt rotation in history. Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, and I think Phil Waldron all had Thanksgiving together. Phil Waldron is the one, he's a deep ex-military friend of Flynn who disgruntled and had been pushing voter fraud lies about the voting machines in 2018 with his buddy Russ Ramsland. They also own ASOG, who in addition for them pushing lies about the voting machine, ASOG was hired to do the Michigan audit about their own claims of voter fraud. Oh, they're all the best people at that Thanksgiving dinner.
the evidence shows that the examiner's decisions in the real world are probably around 90% accurate. But I should correct you, there is one state, and that's the state of New Mexico.
I think time travel and Sammy Davis Jr. was at that too, but I'm not sure because well, Ollie's friends with all those dudes.
Mexico, where polygraph results are admissible just like all other scientific evidence.
In brief, how
so
do
they were admissible at the time. Wait.
These kinds of polygraph tests?
Well, in my opinion, the evidence shows that the examiner's decisions in the real world are probably around 90% accurate. But I should correct you, there is one state, and that's the state of New Mexico, where polygraph results are admissible just like all other scientific evidence.
In brief, how did...
Okay, wait. Here's what's funny. In one state, they're admissible like everybody else, like all other science. So obviously, if you listen closely, he has an opinion. Like, I haven't seen this yet, but he has an opinion because he's saying polygraph is like any other science. So 49 states don't allow it, one does, and he agrees with the one and not the 49 other.
How do these tests work? I mean, we all have this image from television, but how do these tests work?
What a polygraph does is just record physiological changes as people are being asked questions, in this case, for instance, relating to the death of JonBenet. The recordings are then interpreted by somebody who's been trained to do that. So in fact, there is no such thing as a lie detector. The examiner, that is the person who administers the polygraph examination, is the one who really makes the decision. Would
distance in time from an event skew the result?
Let's put polygraphs in a phrasing that I believe. So this is from a show called Lie to Me. And it's all about micro expressions, uniformity of expression, body language, stuff like that. I think this might be the intro to the second episode.
Dr. Lightman, the guys from Homeland Security are here. They want your assessment of the new handheld polygraph.
Be right there.
Do you work at the Department of Homeland Security?
Yes.
Do you have black hair?
Yes.
See, the handheld measures cardio and galvanic skin response. It's the only polygraph ever developed with this kind of portability.
No, not quite.
Cal, you know Secretary Mellor from Homeland Security?
Good to see you.
This is Tom Whitmore, the new TSA deputy.
What the hell is this?
It's a lie detector. West Africans used them first. When you're on trial, you held the egg in your hand, and if it broke, it's a sign of anxiety. You were found guilty.
Well, I'd say our handheld's a little more advanced.
Well, unfortunately, both devices suffer from the same problem. Miss Cooper, would you mind?
May I?
Could you ask the control questions again, please?
What are you doing?
Do you work at the Department of Homeland Security?
Yes. Uh-oh.
Do you have black hair?
Yes. Whoops. The problem with all polygraph tests is false positives.
Innocent people can fail if they feel an increase in any emotion. Anger, fear, sexual arousal, not just guilt. Your polygraph is no better than the egg at telling us which emotion it's responding to.
Oh! I've been wanting to try that for years.
I don't believe so, and I think most examiners
that's my take on polygraph.
would agree with me. There are quite a few cases that occur nationally where there are many years that transpire between the time of occurrence and the polygraph exam, and there doesn't seem to be any detrimental effect from it.
Do physical responses that are measured, are they lessened each time one takes a test?
If there is repeated testing, yes, people will habituate to the test.
So if you notice, the media is treating this, they decide who they have on as a guest, right? They know who they've brought on as a guest, so they're asking questions, but they're the one who chose the guest. They're the ones that put the story up. So when you've got the media framing polygraphs as accurate, but also kind of being like, well, they wouldn't take it from the cops.
But that has to be done in periodic intervals in close succession to each other.
So by taking these tests, the Ramseys could inure themselves against further tests and taint further testing.
Well, if they took tests repeatedly, let's say 3 or 4 or 5 tests over a period of the next 2 weeks or so, then perhaps they might become habituated to the testing. But I don't think that's very likely to happen.
Let me ask you to stand by for a second while I go to Denver, where CBS News legal analyst Andrew Cohen is standing by. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning.
How do we know the Ramseys didn't just keep taking this test until they got the results they wanted?
We don't.
You see what I'm saying? It is not framed, and I don't disagree. Like, it feels propagandistic to put this out. Especially back then, it wasn't normal to protect yourself from the police, right? Even in today's world, it's expected that if your family member is taken, that you should just cooperate. But also, as an individual, you also shouldn't just cooperate. Like, this is what we know in today's world, but back then it did seem anytime a family wouldn't openly fully participate, or at least it was placed that way, it seemed illogical.
Don't know that, Bryant. What we know from their lawyers yesterday is that they took a test in April that proved to be inconclusive, so they had to retest last week, and it was the test last week that they announced yesterday they passed.
The Ramseys have consistently refused to be tested by the Colorado authorities, by the FBI. I mean, should we be surprised that they passed their own organized lie detector tests?
No, not at all. We shouldn't be surprised. They bought and paid for it.
So you can see, even though I say there is a suspicion to this, I also said it doesn't mean they did anything wrong. This is media bias. Me checking my bias and trying to be legitimate, even though I believe the Ramseys did nothing wrong. But I think you can see how easy it is for when all media stories are done this way, where there can only be one reason for a decision. And it's the one that justifies your existing belief. So when I say media bias, it literally is bias of the people in the media. It's not necessarily a grand conspiracy. But when all of the media frames it this way, it becomes like an unintended collusion. Like the pharmaceutical company, the hospitals, and the insurance companies. They don't necessarily all work together to hurt us, but like they all of their interests collide with fucking us over.
Obviously, they wouldn't have had a press conference yesterday heralding the news had they failed it. That they felt they needed to do this.
Well, that is true. That's what I was saying. They wouldn't have done that. But for him to go out and assert that he knows what's going on because of X, Y, and Z, this is just more proof of like the Denver Boulder already existing bias that just kept getting reaffirmed by people of stature.
Because they're waging a public relations war. The test has very little legal significance. The Boulder officials already are saying they don't really care about it. They want to take...
So it's suspicious that they didn't take the cops one, but also they don't care about this one.
Their own test. So the Ramseys feel this is all...
Their test doesn't matter. Only our test does. That's it in a nutshell right there.
Relations war. The test has very little legal significance. The Boulder officials already are saying they don't really care about it. They want to take their own test. So the Ramseys feel this is all about public relations and less about the law. It doesn't help them.
Well, that's what the cops did. See, this is what I'm saying. You can easily say the cops just don't want to accept it. It's all about PR for them. But if your bias is you hate the family, then the exact same thing is the opposite. It's like Laurel and Yanni. I like to show this example to help show our bias. Damn, I got like some eye flutter. It's fucking with my eye. Well, it's not fucking with my knee, obviously.
All right, I'm gonna play a recording.
Shit, it's the wrong window. If you're watching any sort of media and your expectation is it's accurate and you don't verify it, it's brutal. Because if you have a hypothesis and then you find ways to fit any result into the hypothesis, then you didn't use any sort of scientific method. You used manipulation. The chipmunk noise. Yeah.
We don't see reality. We see our reality.
That's the key. But that's also the key to understanding the Ramseys, the police, the whites, all of it. Like this, the hardest thing about a lot of what I do, Murder Mondays is just one thing that I do. Most of what I do is looking at politics and how the media covers politics, and we'll look at actual court cases and then we'll look at how the media covers them so that we can see the difference between the details and the narrative. I even do a show Thursday night with a buddy of mine over on Twitch called Uninformed, where he like follows right-wing media, I follow left-wing media, and we just kind of talk about hey, what's up, Severed? We talk about how they do the different presentation of same things. Like, was Alaska Airline door that flew off, was that part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or was that part of deregulation? And how do we figure that out? And who's talking about what? So I'm always focused on how is the media portraying this? What is the way? Hey, Aiken, I hope you're feeling well. How is the media portraying this thing? Why? And where are the gaps? A perfect example I can give you is with CNN, MSNBC, and all of the perceived Democrat-based media. Back when Donnie Boy withheld aid to Ukraine, Mulvaney came out and he admitted they did it. I watched the whole press conference. He admitted they did it. And later he was asked a question and he said, look, everybody does this. This is just how it works. Get over it. But the media portrayed that was his answer to a previous question. Now, the previous answer was bad enough. They didn't have to redo the story, but the way they did it manipulated the story, and they reduced their credibility because they gave something to attack. So the story was generally accurate, but the way they portrayed it wasn't accurate. Like it was like a broken clock type thing. And because they didn't do the actual work and even present it the fucking way I did by watching the conference with people, like you see the difference in how, like Joe Rogan when he had on Sanjay Gupta, and when you talk about media bias, the people that support Rogan and the right, they felt that Rogan owned Gupta because he talked about, well, you called it horse paste. It's not horse paste. You called it horse paste. Why do you have to call it horse paste? Why do you have to lie? And it was like Rogan busts CNN lying. But the rest of the conversation was like, my memes on Facebook are more accurate than your science. And that's nonsensical. So like if you're not looking at it from I love Rogan and I hate science, then you're going to see it one way versus the other. And this media presentation, I haven't found a single piece of media. Oh yeah. I normally stream for about 4 hours. So the media presentation of this is nonsensical. Like you'll see they will discredit the thing that they're claiming in their own journalism. So, let's finish this.
Legally, it doesn't move them outside of that umbrella of suspicion that the officials here have been talking about for about 3 years.
Yeah, it has no weight in the court of.
Yeah, but there are also plenty of people that said they don't think the family did it. Like, what about Lou? You know, they totally dismiss Lou as if he's crazy, but they can't discredit any of the shit he says. They just say, nah.
Law, does it have any weight then in the court of public opinion?
I think so. Perhaps already we're hearing that some people may have been moved by this news, but I think in Colorado and probably in the rest of the nation, there are two camps about this Ramsey case. There are people who believe that the Ramseys may have had something to do with the death of their daughter. There are people who firmly believe the opposite. I don't think this test changed the majority of those people.
That's
I think
true.
people who
That's
think that
accurate.
they may have done something probably are discounting the test. The people who think that they may have been involved or were not involved are.
This is a case. This is a good example of where emotions rule the day, even back then.
Pointing to the test and showing that they're innocent. So I don't think this moves the bubble a little bit, but the Ramseys thought it would. They hoped it would, and I think that's why they took the time and the effort and paid the money to take the test.
Professor Horvath.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We found no Ramsey DNA, but that doesn't mean anything. Also, we didn't find Santa Claus's DNA, so that ruled him out.
They took a polygraph test before this one. Supposedly, the results were inconclusive. How can they be inconclusive?
Sometimes people are overly anxious at the first time of the examination. Sometimes in a case like this, in particular, they're unfamiliar with the protocol that is involved in doing a polygraph examination. So I think sometimes that lack of familiarity with the process will lead to that.
Well, like, they want to explain away everything that doesn't fit their narrative, but they also can't complete their own narrative. Like, what do the cops believe happened? Do they think Patsy got angry and killed her? Do they think Burke did it? Do they think John did it? And Patsy wrote like, what? I've never heard them give how this happened. They just say this happened, they did it. I've never heard anybody claiming the parents did it actually give a theory of how they did it. They will say, well, why would somebody else write that letter and pick that number? Well, why would the Ramseys do it? Well, so you didn't know that her head was gaped open. How would the Ramseys know? Well, so you're saying he staged a fucking torture killing and a child rape over an accident like that? They were like, how do we cover this accident up? I know, let's rape our daughter. Like, what are we doing?
That kind of outcome.
All right, Andrew Cohen, so what happens next? Absent any startling new evidence, is this murder ever going to be solved?
That's exactly the way I would phrase it, Brian. Unless there's a confession, unless a new witness steps forward, unless technology changes and allows officials here to test this evidence again, we are at a standstill. There's a camp that believes the Ramseys may have been involved inside the DA's office. There's a camp that believes that an intruder committed the crime, and there is literally gridlock, and I don't think this test changes that.
All right, Andrew Cohen in Colorado and Professor Frank Horvath in Michigan.
So then we have... Oh, no, that's the lie to me clip. Then we have let's talk about the grand jury. So a grand jury was impaneled, and it wasn't a special grand jury. It's just a grand jury. Rocky Flats was a special grand jury. So the thing about a grand jury is I hear the media often talk about how a grand jury indictment is like proof of something. And that if the grand jury indicts, that you need to indict the person. I've also heard the media over and over say, you could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. So which one is it? The media can't have it both ways. Can anybody get an indictment for anything? Or does a grand jury indictment and then Hunter not moving forward, does that prove Hunter is biased and that the Ramseys did it? You'll see the media will allow both to be claimed. But they'll stick with one narrative, even though both will be claimed. And I'm speaking of a specific video we're going to watch. Nobody blames the aliens. I think it was DEI and CRT. This sounds to me like an alien abduction gone wrong. Well, that's because they used they're supposed to have their own probe. Indicted on 2 charges, none of which were murder. Yeah, we're going to go over that. Absolutely. Ham and cheese sandwiches. The thing about this is, I want to remind you, in Georgia, in the special grand jury, even though 19 people were indicted on the RICO case, 36 or 35 people were indicted in the grand jury, the special grand jury, and I think the grand jury. I don't know if, I know in the special grand jury, it was like 35 people, including sitting members of Congress and so forth. But they decided not to move forward with almost half of them. So the fact that Hunter didn't move forward isn't any more suspicious than anybody else not moving forward. Often a grand jury isn't used to get the indictment because if you had enough evidence, you wouldn't need the fucking grand jury. You don't take every case to a grand jury. You use the grand jury because you don't have enough to just arrest him. So the other side of it is the same person they're blaming as putting their thumb on the scale is the person that decided what evidence to present. So if they wanted to put their thumb on the scale, why wouldn't they just present the evidence like in Kentucky to put their thumb on the scale when they like intentionally only gave information to the grand jury that would keep the cops safe from the Breonna Taylor murder? That was later found out. Like, that's not my opinion. So all of these things come down to individual people's behavior. Could Alex Hunter put his finger on the scale? Sure. Is he the one that decided not to indict? Yeah. But I think you're going to hear an interesting comment from a supposed grand juror. And the supposed grand juror tells you exactly why Hunter didn't indict and that they agreed with it.
Reckless child abuse resulting in death in Colorado is still a very serious felony.
Fried egg sandwich. I burned a couple eggs this morning, so lock me up. Right to jail. Right to jail. You mess up eggs, right to jail. Undercook eggs, right to jail.
That's exactly the classification of second-degree murder. And so they both are Class 2 felonies. They both carry the presumptive range in prison of 8 to 24 years. And with exceptional circumstances, either of them, second-degree murder or child abuse resulting in death, can be as many as 48 years or as little as 4 years. So the summary of it is that the range in punishment, prison time, on reckless child abuse resulting in death is 4 years all the way up to 48 years.
So here's the thing. There's two schools of thought. And I think this is a pretty good indicator. Now, there's other reasons why people might blame the Ramseys, and that's just like because they need it to be them. Like that, there's some people that's this. But when it comes to the way you can look at what's going on here, there's two different like trolley type problems I could give you. Which would you rather? 9 innocent people go to jail to make sure a murderer was jailed, or 9 guilty people, 9 guilty people go free to make sure an innocent person isn't convicted? Which would you take? Would you take 9 free murderers to not have a wrongful conviction? Or would you take a wrongfully committed to get those 9 murderers? I don't know. Statistics show. God damn it.
Dan, let's talk about...
But that's the trolley problem. Like, that's the thing. You're presented with 2 lose scenarios. Which one do you choose?
A decision that
if you're thinking on a macro scale for society in general, then probably you would be okay with the 1 innocent being jailed to make sure 9 murderers weren't out. But if you believe in individual rights, you'd say, fuck the society, let those murderers out because I don't want to be jailed for wrongful reasons. I mean, there is no right answer. There's just enough of those answers kind of build a personality profile.
Made not to sign this true bill, making it an indictment to go forward with the prosecution. He had to make his decision based on thinking about a different level of proof than the grand jury had in mind in making their decision. Talk about that, the differing levels, the different standards of proof involved.
Sure. At a grand jury...
Okay. Joseph, I can't call that child abuse. Okay? The reason I can't call that child abuse is we would have to label Christianity and then like more broadly Christianity, but directly any of those like heavy indoctrinating religions that where like you can't have certain books or you can't this or Pokemon is evil, you can't watch Harry Potter. Like it's the same type of shit because I think cheerleading is wrong, but is that child abuse like a pageant is? I think those weird dance things in small little outfits are weird, but is that art or is that like, so if they're going to have it, you'd have to fucking call, you'd have to call all of these things child abuse. So, but like, so if you're saying it in a broad sense, okay, but I can't include the parents in this crime because their child was in pageants. By all accounts, the girls seemed to enjoy it.
Level.
I mean, I was a martial arts instructor for a little bit. And the martial arts that I taught wasn't serious. It was to build leadership and confidence and stuff like that for kids more than it was like to teach them how to fight. It wasn't jujitsu. And so we'd go to tournaments and most people would be having fun. But then you'd see those like serious dads and like yelling at their 8-year-old over they missed a step or their foot was in the wrong place. And it's like, dude, the fuck is wrong with you? Sexual, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. I just can't label it that way.
Just like at a preliminary hearing level.
Because then there's a lot of people that will label a lot of things child abuse, like taking your kid to a pride parade is child abuse.
That recently occurred in the Holmes case. The grand jury or the judge.
Taking your kid to a country concert would be child abuse.
Judge in a preliminary hearing simply has to find that there's probable cause to believe that a person or persons committed
Every
the crime.
rose has its thorns, true.
That couldn't be more
True.
different in a jury trial. So what Alex Hunter was thinking about is, but can I
Is that Guns N' Roses or Bon Jovi?
prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? Because that's the burden the prosecution has at a trial. And so he seemingly decided, I'm not going to be able to prove this reckless child abuse resulting in death beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury.
This news coming out now, what do you think the potential impact of it could be down the line should we have an attempted prosecution of somebody, John Doe, somebody not named Ramsey? What problems or challenges
Poison.
would this
Really? Fuck.
news pose in that prosecution?
Did you ever see Sebastian Bach in Trailer Park Boys?
I don't think any of this grand jury proceeding would be admissible in a jury trial if someone else gets charged with the Ramsey case somewhere way down the road, or now, for that matter. It could affect the plea bargaining. It could affect whether a prosecutor, the current prosecutor, is willing to bring charges. Those are all very
for sure, Aiken.
subjective things that could come into play or not. I don't know.
Like the Hendersons.
But as far as a jury making a determination in a future prosecution.
Yeah, he was in Trailer Park Boys. He did it. He kept doing drug deals with them. Yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes. See if I can find it.
Gets heard by the jury. I think a judge excludes it.
Talk about what you think the ramifications of this coming out now, 16 years after her death, 13 years after the grand jury finished their work. What does this mean?
We have a shitty arcade, though. Smoke some more bud.
He was in Skid Row too.
Fuck, I haven't had dope like this in years. Fucking years. You grew this?
Yeah, man.
Oh, I haven't had dope like this since I was touring Europe in '88 with Scorpions. Hello, California! You are crazy! We are Scorpions! Rock you like a hurricane!
Rock you like a hurricane! Dr. Roxo.
Ow!
That's such a great... Oh, what a fun season that was.
What's the fallout potentially? Do you think?
Damn, who did this video with the shit volume? Fuck's sake.
I'm not sure if it's going to move the ball down the field as far as figuring out who actually did this, or as far as prosecuting anybody for doing this. So I don't know if it does anything in that regard. On the other hand, this was a case that was watched by the whole country, and this new information gives the country and the community some insight into how the criminal justice system works, and that's helpful. I mean, that's what, in essence,
oh my God, I
the First
can't believe
Amendment
I
is
have him on
about, and
regular
that is
speed.
to let the citizens, let the community understand how government works, how the criminal justice system works, how government works in general, and this is helpful in that regard.
Do you think there's any question of fairness to the surviving target of this grand jury vote, John Ramsey, that this come out now? Do you think that there is a disservice in any way to this becoming public in regards to Mr. Ramsey?
You know, I think the community and the press normally have to err on the side of disclosure, having stories be public.
Yeah, but see, they didn't. They don't err on the side of disclosure. They err on the side of disclosure of the things they want to disclose. Like, they're limited by time, and so they pick what they want to say. I mean, we can't pretend like there's no bias.
The community able to know, and sometimes it does have a negative effect on individuals, and this may well be emotionally difficult for John Ramsey, but in the balance, I think it's fair to say it's more important that the community knows how the process worked in this very case.
This evening, do not think that what my family has to say is important. I want to emphasize to you that there has perhaps never been...
Okay, wait. Do I have this open somewhere else? No. Okay. I wasn't going to play this, but since it came up, these are the whites, okay? And they spoke at a number of meetings. I don't normally say this, but she's very attractive. I was just stunned.
White? Looks like there's a number of whites here in a row. So
Yeah, it looks like we got a lot of whites here.
Good evening. My name is Fleet White, and I live at 4350.
I'll bet you right there, that's a very standard, like, Boulder business attire.
Drive in Boulder. You may recall that our family is currently engaged in litigation with the city concerning a criminal justice records request that we made pursuant to Colorado statutes relative to the 2000 Boulder police investigation of the claims and allegations of...
Who are these chodes?
Nancy Krebs against our family. We last addressed the city...
Okay, so Nancy Krebs, is that the one who said... That's the one who said Fleet raped her or abused her. And the funny thing I find is somehow somebody like Fleet finds it completely inappropriate for public information that might not be true to be spread about him, but also has no problems with how it's done for the Ramseys.
Council on this on March...
At least that's my understanding of the whites' take.
You may be aware that the Boulder District Court has...
and this says it was 2014.
Since dismissed...
Any idea what happened with that court case?
You may be aware that the Boulder District Court has since dismissed our application for an order for the city to show cause why it should not release those records to us and to the public.
There you go.
We have made a motion to the court asking for it to reconsider, and the city has filed a reply in opposition.
And some other guy named Ramsey. Named a different John Ramsey? What?
Last Thursday, May 29th, we sent the city council transcripts of the 2000 Boulder police interviews of Nancy Krebs that were released by the Boulder District Court in 2002 in a similar court action that we had to bring against the city to show cause why the Krebs investigation records were not to be released. We wanted you to read those so that you understand what has been placed in the public record without any offsetting information from the Boulder police investigation.
So notice how almost everybody that had interactions with the Boulder police are like, yeah, they let this information get out and never clarified. But that's what I'm saying about the media, is the cops will give the media information, and then the media will run with that narrative, and then it'll never get corrected. That's so weird.
We trust the city council has read all of the material that we have provided regarding this matter.
What is your take on Krebs?
By the city attorney regarding the litigation and the basis for denying our family and the public access to those records.
Lee, I have to cut you off there.
Here's the thing, right? Let me tell you something about crazy people. Okay? Let me dip into another topic that I like to cover. Oh shit, I hope I put it on an easy list. Let me find it while I remind me I'm talking about crazy people.
My name is Daphne White. My address is 4350 Comanche Drive, Boulder, Colorado. I am a graduate of Boulder Public Schools and a 2014 graduate of the United States Naval Academy. I am an ensign in the United States Navy. JonBenet Ramsey was my best friend. I was 6 years old when she was murdered in 1996.
Wait, is Burke married?
I'm a Boulder police witness in the investigation by the Boulder Police Department and was interviewed many times by various members of Boulder law enforcement. My big brother, Fleet, and I were too young in 2000 to fully understand the damage that would be inflicted on our family as a result of the publication of Nancy Krebs' lies.
Oh, that's Fleet's
now we
sister.
do understand.
That's Fleet's sister.
If any of you, ladies and gentlemen, here this evening do not think that what my family has to say is important, I want to emphasize to you that there has perhaps never been a more egregious injustice against a family, and this council has the power to release the Nancy Krebs file in its entirety. I respectfully ask that you take that action. Please make the records public so that whatever truth they possess may offset the lies and injustice committed against my dad, my mom, my big brother, and myself, because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think they were wrongly accused, and if she needs to talk to anybody, she can call me.
Priscilla?
That's fucked up.
Good evening. My name is also Fleet White. I'm Fleet White III. My permanent address is 4350 Comanche Drive in Boulder, Colorado. I'm a graduate of the Boulder Public Schools and a 2012 graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy.
Oh, that was
I also was a childhood friend of JonBenet and Burke Ramsey. Along with the rest of my family, I was a police witness for the investigation into JonBenet's death. Boulder prosecutors also interviewed.
Damn, why do all, with due respect, so many of these like white, like somewhat well-to-do people remind me of the Murdoch family?
In relation to the Boulder grand jury that indicted John and Patsy Ramsey for crimes related to the death of JonBenet. Because we live in the internet age, the lies and filth that the Boulder Daily Camera and Alex Hunter unleashed against my family in 2000 will follow us for the rest of our lives. I ask you to put yourself in my shoes. As a young adult starting my career, I have to live with Google search results that associate my name with the failed JonBenet Ramsey murder investigation and the lies that Alex Hunter promoted in order to protect himself and John and Patsy Ramsey. My family and I are Boulder police witnesses. For that reason, and for that reason alone, we have suffered the worst defamation imaginable. I request that you, as the Boulder City Council, direct the Boulder Police Department to release the documents we request to alleviate some of the damage this city has caused us. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Priscilla White, and I reside at 4350 Comanche Drive in Boulder. With regard to our family's request for the Krebs criminal justice records, there is simply nothing on your agenda this evening or that is likely to appear on future agendas for the remainder of your term on this council that is more important to this community and its ethos than the matter of the Krebs criminal justice records. Each of you must
what's your take on Krebs?
Satisfy yourself that withholding these records from our family and the public is the just, fair, and transparent thing to do.
Okay, so they spoke out also. This is what I was going to say. The problem with crazy, right? And this is somewhat old. This is on May 18, 2018. Officers responded to Trump National Doral Miami Hotel regarding multiple reports regarding an erratic man with a gun in the lobby. Okay? Sounds fucking crazy, right? What the fuck? Okay. At least in regards to John. But I'm going to show you some. I'm only going to show you a little bit because I'm going to do this in another day. But like, I think it's important to understand just because somebody's crazy doesn't mean they can't be telling some truth. Not all truth, some truth.
Stormy story is bad news.
because it's embarrassing. That's why he's going crazy with that. It's not that he's laughing to the American people. He's embarrassed about Stormy's situation, okay?
You don't have...
No, I think it's apropos, seeing as this, he's talking about Trump and Stormy Daniels, when this election interference case, they started jury selection today. Voir dire started today.
Found in the United States?
Yeah.
Just my dog, Bubbles. My service dog? Yeah. Diddy said Ross, which they good.
Diddy said Ross. Here, let's see if I can get, there we go. Diddy said Ross.
Good buddies, okay?
It was good buddies.
They're gay.
Diddy and Rick Ross are gay. Now, we know the Diddy accusations that have come out that include Rick Ross being gay. Between Cassie and Lil Rod and somebody else, I think her name's Grace, who was like they call him a stewardess, but was working on the yacht and was like drugged and shit and harassed. So like there's all these people that have come out and have had these accusations.
Who? Both Diddy and Ross and Khaled. They're all gay. Okay?
DJ Khaled, Rick.
DJ Khaled. And in one of the recent lawsuits, it said other industry people were there, including a producer known for, and another one. Or maybe it was We the Best Music. I can't remember. Either way, it's the same, like, they don't say the name, but they're saying DJ Khaled was there like fucking dudes.
Ross and P. Diddy?
Yeah.
They all gay?
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Khaled is a Hamas supporter. Okay.
Who supporter?
Hamas.
What happened?
Hamas.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said it wrong.
No worries.
Hamas supporter.
So DJ Khaled is a Hamas supporter. This is 2018, before the attack.
Okay. I had sex with Cassie and Sean.
I had sex with Cassie and Sean.
Basically, he would masturbate and tell me what to do with Cassie. I had like 15
We know that he does this. We know he does this.
encounters, and I heard a lot.
Hidden in plain sight.
It's hidden.
I think I see what you're saying.
And they're talking to him like he's a fucking idiot. But literally everything he has said is rooted in reality. Trump, Stormy Daniels shit, that's going on now. Cohen went to jail for it around that time. Diddy is fucking doing this shit, at least according to the civil cases and a raid on his houses. So, but the guy is crazy. Like, if you listen to this whole thing, the dude is a fucking whack job. Trump's here to drain the swamp, and they're after him because he's draining the swamp, and they don't like it. But there could be stuff to that. Like, but you can't. When crazy gets involved, it's hard to parse. And that's why, like, even when you watch, you need to watch stuff you don't agree with and watch it objectively enough that you can agree with the things that you agree with, even when you disagree with what they're saying. Because if you can be as impartial as possible, when you can admit to somebody in a conversation, I don't like that, that looks bad, in addition to the other things I'm seeing, when you can have that kind of authenticity to identify the things wrong with your own opinions or people that generally agree with you that you disagree with, you've now hopefully softened the ability for them to admit some fallibility also.
Did the grand jury make the right decision in 1999? That's the first question I have for you, James. What do you say to that?
So this is a supposed grand juror, I think.
Well, I think it shows that they...
No, maybe not. Former investigator for the Boulder DA's office, James Kohler. I don't know anything about this guy.
The same evidence that Boulder police investigators were considering at the time that they were attempting to identify the perpetrator in this crime. And based upon their review and the new release of the documents about the indictments, it seems to me that they believe the family was involved in some fashion and decided to indict on those two charges that were considered.
All right. So we know those two charges, child abuse resulting in death and accessory
2013.
to the crime. What evidence was missing that kept the DA from going forward?
Well, that's a very complicated question. I think there could have been a lot of things that could be considered missing from the DA's perspective to be able to bring them to a threshold of prosecuting beyond a reasonable doubt.
So he had nothing to do with the case, but he's talking about it.
I think there's been a lot of discussion about the threshold for an indictment being the same as probable cause as an officer would have for arresting someone. But the prosecutor's office has a higher standard when they decide to prosecute someone.
Wait a second. The police can just like arrest people, right? And then deal with it. They can arrest people and then the DA can decide to prosecute or not. But if they don't have enough probable cause, they can't arrest them and they need the grand jury to establish probable cause. So the cops themselves didn't have probable cause.
Someone for an offense.
Well, I know the attorney for John.
I mean, they didn't even have like a reasonable, articulatable suspicion to detain them. The cops never even detained them.
Ramsey issued the following statement. I want to read that to you. Public release of the allegations of an unprosecuted indictment only serves to further defame him and his late...
I agree. You do not release the results of a grand jury if you're not going to indict. That is fundamentally unprincipled. And not only that, if the grand jurors speak out, you're going to put them in jail. But when the thing leaks out, that's no big deal. Where he did work on the case, but it was years afterwards. Gotcha. So wasn't around when the crime happened and had less experience with the case directly than Lou.
Wife. So a lot of people,
all he got to do was look at the folders.
People are saying, why release these documents now? Is it fair?
Well, I think it's an important piece of the historical...
it's important that we release this, but also we can't let the grand jurors speak. We've made it illegal for the people involved in the grand jury to talk about the grand jury. But other than that, we think transparency is important for the thing we want to put out.
History of this investigation. The grand jury considered evidence and apparently did vote.
So why not put the whole grand jury out? Why just the results? Why keep the entire thing hidden except the thing you wanted to put out? That is no more acceptable than the Ramseys putting out their own polygraph. So as I say, every time the cops assign something to the Ramseys, you could assign it to them just the same.
To indict on two specific charges. The prosecuting attorney decided not to file charges.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You need some sort of probable cause. Like, Crazy Eyes was sure it was him at 1:15. Why didn't we just arrest him? Your own people didn't care what you had to say.
The record stands that the foreman and the grand jury felt that there were sufficient grounds to arrest or at least charge, and that's why they signed the indictments.
Now, I'm going to, again, we're going to get to one of the grand jurors, supposedly one of the grand jurors, explaining that this guy is correct, but also saying he 100% agrees with Alex Hunter.
Time back in 1999.
Okay, so what were in the other documents, and why not release all of them at this point?
That's a question I think that everyone is asking.
Oh, we need transparency also.
Alex Hunter at the time could have indicated that the grand jury did find true bills on two specific charges. He chose not to do so for whatever reason.
Yes, because you don't announce the result if you're not going to charge. You don't incriminate somebody while saying, I'm not charging him. He should be indicted, but I'm not going to do it. What are you talking about? This is the idea. I would rather 9 innocent people be jailed if that gets us the one murderer. I don't think that's how I put it before, but that is what I mean. put 9 innocent people in jail to get 1 murder.
Reason. And then he could have also indicated that while the grand jury did indict, that perhaps he didn't feel there were still sufficient grounds for him to prosecute.
You know, the count 7 from this grand jury basically said that they knew who killed her but covered it up. They looked at, I know this grand jury looked at 30,000 pieces of evidence, dozens of witnesses over 13 months. Did you see any evidence of a cover-up in what you uncovered?
I think it's extremely unlikely that an intruder was involved in this.
See what I'm saying? She said, was there any evidence covered up? But he says, no way an intruder. But one of your detectives and people that you hired, experts, said there was an intruder. And you come out and you say there was no intruder. No way. But you're saying evidence, but there's DNA that doesn't belong to the family. Are you just throwing that out? 2 men sitting in a van outside the Ramseys' home on Christmas Eve when John went to get the bikes.
This situation. And what's frustrating for me is that the DNA evidence continues to be proffered as proof that an intruder was involved. The fact of
So
the matter
who do you
is
think
that-
was involved?
So you can't trust the DNA. Like the cops are saying the DNA that we collected cannot be trusted. Also, why won't he take a polygraph with us? The DNA that excludes him but has JonBenet's DNA. Even though we say they destroyed the crime scene by touching X, Y, and Z, we don't have their DNA on these things. But saying that DNA is important, that's just, I don't understand why you would do that. Also, we excluded people because of the said DNA.
James?
I do not think an intruder was involved. There was more than one sample of DNA that was discovered over the course of this investigation. The touch DNA that was done late in 2008 and 2009 revealed additional unknown, unidentified male samples of DNA on the implements used in the murder of JonBenet. If you look at
what didn't you found DNA on the murder weapon and JonBenet that is foreign DNA. So not only did you exclude them, did it exclude them originally, but under more scrutiny, you say it wasn't Ramsey DNA. And that's proof there was no intruder. What the fuck is wrong with this guy?
the totality of those circumstances, there are 6 unidentified samples of DNA, trace amounts.
So,
that's
do
more
you
than-
think the parents...
So none of them are the Ramseys. Got it. So all the unidentified DNA excludes the Ramseys.
Are incriminated in this case based on all the evidence you've seen?
I believe a strong...
Okay, now this is the sign of a fucking shitty interviewer with a willingness to allow the person being interviewed to completely control the narrative. See, when it comes to asking questions, there's open-ended questions and there's closed-ended questions. When you start a question with "do you," it's yes or no. Are you sure? Yes. Do you believe? Yes. Are you under the impression? Instead, you say, what is your impression? What is the evidence? What is the evidence you would use to convict them? Well, there was no intruder, I'll tell you that. So it had to be them. Okay, but on what evidence? That's an interview.
Involved in this situation. And what's frustrating for me is this.
They looked at, I know this grand jury looked at 30,000 pieces of evidence, dozens of witnesses over 13 months. Did you see any evidence of a cover-up in what you uncovered?
See what I'm saying? This is not how you conduct an interview. Did you see this? Do you believe? Do you really believe the election was stolen? Like, that's not how you ask a question. You don't ask a kid, do you have homework? You ask a kid which homework's going to take you the longest.
I think it's extremely unlikely that an intruder was involved in this situation. And what's frustrating for me is that the DNA evidence continues to be proffered as proof that an intruder was involved.
So DNA without the finding DNA and it not be the parents' DNA shouldn't be looked at as excluding the parents. Because why?
So who do you think was involved, James?
I do not think an intruder was involved.
You fucking pussy. What a pussy. I'm afraid of a lawsuit. I'm not going to say John Ramsey did it. I'm just going to say an intruder didn't do it.
There was more than one sample of DNA that was discovered over the course of this investigation. The touch DNA that was done late in 2008 and 2009 revealed additional unknown, unidentified male samples of DNA on the implements used in the murder of JonBenet. If you look at the totality of those circumstances, there are 6 unidentified samples of DNA, trace amounts.
So, so do you think the
all 6 are the same?
Parents are incriminated in this case based on all the evidence you've seen?
Do you think the parents did it?
Strong look was warranted by investigating the family as a possible.
Okay, but when you say investigating the family, do you mean specifically the parents or do you mean someone else in the family?
There were 3 people in the home that evening. I think investigators needed to look at all 3 of them.
Nobody else, though. Don't ignore the DNA and stick with the family.
Okay, do you think, boy, at this point, do you think this case is ever going to be solved? That we're ever going to know?
It's very unlikely unless there's a confession or someone else comes forward that has information.
Right, because you're never going to look at anybody else, ever.
That's been shared with them. There is one other possible lead that I proposed to the Boulder Police Department and the DA's office over the course of writing Foreign Faction, and that was another grand jury inquiry and calling Burke Ramsey to the stand in that event. Would anything come of that? I could
call Burke Ramsey. If you call the 9-year-old to the stand, that'll change everything.
9 months after the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, there are still no suspects under arrest. But now there is word that the 2 sides in the investigation are on the same side when it comes to business. More on this possible conflict of interest from ABC's Lisa Salters in Boulder.
Boulder District Attorney Alex Hunter and this man, William Gray, a Ramsey family civil attorney, both own small shares of a multi-million-dollar Boulder office complex.
Holy fuck. What a stretch. Alex Hunter is throwing the case because of this weird conflict of interest. Like, this is the way the news covered this shit. Now, here's how 2020 did it in 2016. I mean, it's crazy. So this is the main crux of what I want to do to show you how the media behaves. And then we're going to get into how some of the insiders discuss it that aren't of the strange obsession that no matter how much information points away from the Ramseys, we're going to say it doesn't make sense, so it has to be the Ramseys. And the media is extremely culpable for the excessive amount of people that just fervently believe without any reason that the Ramseys did this.
Based on the evidence you were presented, do you feel you know who killed JonBenet Ramsey?
I highly suspect I do.
Tonight, all new information, an exclusive interview on the 20th anniversary of one of the most infamous cold case murders in American history.
This is JonBenet. This was a child who was put to bed by her parents and never woke up.
Speaking out for the first time only to 2020.
Wait, that's not true. That's not even true. She never woke up. You sure about that? You sure about that? She never woke up? No, she was like brutally raped and strangled. But you won't say that because if you say she was brutally raped and strangled with other people's DNA at the scene, you can't spread the narrative that the Ramseys did it. So you have to change the language. And we're seeing this in modern day, by the way. When you look at how the media handles many cases, the Sam Bankman-Fried fraud case right? The Danny Masterson rape case, the George Floyd murder case, which actually should have been the Chauvin murder case. But when it comes to how they're talking about 4 specific sets of cases with one person, instead of saying the criminal conspiracy to interfere and overthrow the election case in Georgia, they say the Georgia Rico Trump case. That's not what the case is. The case is 19 people conspiring to overthrow the election. But you just say the Trump Georgia case. They don't say the Florida case about stolen nuclear secrets in plain sight and lying and manipulating the FBI. The espionage case. They say the Florida documents case. When it was about the sexual assault and defamation of E. Jean Carroll, it was the E. Jean Carroll defamation case, not the E. Jean Carroll sexual assault case. So, like, they decide what to call these things. And you can see how right there, this little girl went to sleep and never woke up. No, this little girl went to sleep, and sometime during the night, she was brutally beaten, strangled, and sexually assaulted and left for dead in a hidden room in the basement. That's very different than she went to bed and never woke up.
Cold case murders in American history.
I mean, in what scenario is that accurate? Is it the scenario where she said, I wet my bed? Is it like, what's the scenario where she didn't wake up?
This is JonBenet. This was a child.
He says that the name the detective Lou Smith gave on his deathbed was that of a family member of someone who had a business grudge. So somebody with the Hendersons.
Who was put to bed by her parents and never woke up.
Speaking out for the first time only to 2020, a grand juror who saw firsthand the prosecution's case.
Was there enough evidence to indict John and Patsy Ramsey of a crime?
These are the 2 major motives. Either you sexually molested her or you snapped.
And just this week, plans...
Like, these are the 2 motives. You did this. Like, look at the framing. So, when YouTubers create an intro to a video, the reason they're doing that is to frame it as something so that you'll watch. When media does that, it's the same thing. They're framing to you the way they want you to see the story. There's nothing in this framing that is about both sides. It's all framing that the parents did it and are getting away with it.
For a new DNA investigation.
Investigators say they are exploring new DNA testing
that could point a path to the killer or killers.
Should the Ramseys have been exonerated?
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board.
We're taking you inside our 2020 crime lab.
So there are 2 basic theories. The intruder.
Uh-oh, looks like somebody could have got in here.
And then there's the insider theory, a family member.
Who would write a 3-page rambling ransom note other than someone trying to cover their tracks?
Right. So anybody that murdered a kid would be wanting to cover their tracks, right? So saying the note doesn't make sense for an intruder, but for the Ramseys, well, they both want to cover their tracks. So why does one make sense over the other? Like, you can't have it both ways.
Tonight, after 20 years, why are we still confounded and haunted by what happened to a 6-year-old girl on Christmas night?
Is anyone going to pay for murdering that beautiful little girl? Somewhere, somehow, there may be a match to that DNA. Then you got your killer.
This bitch is, she went to sleep. She never woke up. Magic DNA killer. But you do need to send that shit to 23andMe.
Good evening, I'm David Muir.
And I'm Elizabeth Vargas. As we approach the 20th anniversary of one of the more disturbing murders in American history, we have an all-new look at the case from someone just now coming forward. On camera, for the first time, a grand juror who saw thousands of pieces of...
What's hilarious to me is they will raise doubt about what information other people present. But wait till you see how they present this quote unquote grand juror, and wait till you hear what the grand juror says and how they interpret it.
Evidence over the course of a 13-month secret proceeding.
And also breaking just this week, word of a brand new DNA investigation in the works right now. Cutting-edge tools only now available that might finally answer the question, who killed JonBenet? Amy Robach tonight with the story of the little pageant girl who never got to live out her childhood.
Right. I mean,
the whole
I agree.
JonBenet thing, you see
I'm
it on
just
TV
trying
all
to be impartial in my language.
the time. All the terrible things that can happen to people.
God damn.
I was her age. She would be my age now. She would be pursuing her own career. Once you
Wait. I was her age. She would be my age now. That is how time works. I know, that is typically how time works, where like, if you guys were the same age, then right now, like you wouldn't age at different rates.
realize like she never got to grow up.
Back then, Thumper Gosney was JonBenet's friend and competitor on the Kitty Beauty pageant circuit.
JonBenet was the nicest girl. Like she was very poised in all of her things she did.
Here in the foothills of the Rockies is the town where
Damn, what is a 6-year-old being poised? Those are good. That is indoctrinating.
JonBenet Ramsey grew up. Boulder, Colorado, a quirky college town described by locals as 25 square miles of fantasy surrounded by reality.
We assumed we were living in a little town and that evil existed elsewhere.
The year was 1996. The Macarena at the top of the charts.
If I had a time machine,
I love
that's one thing I would make never happen.
Oprah started a book club. The country had just re-elected President Bill Clinton. As for the Ramseys, John and Patsy, 6-year-old JonBenet, and big brother Burke, age 9, they were the very picture of the good life.
I'm sorry, but Burke looks special needs. Always has to me.
Wealthy, thanks to John's thriving computer business.
Patsy was a high
is he mentally special?
Society woman from Atlanta who knew how to decorate her house. John was a smart guy who had just been nominated or voted as Entrepreneur of the Year.
I do think it is worth mentioning for fairness. Patsy was what, 23, and he was in his mid-30s?
So really the two of them were high society for Boulder.
Patsy had just beaten ovarian cancer and was...
Dude, with all due respect, I mean, maybe that's way later, but can I see one of the beauty pageant pictures of her?
And big brother and Bill Clinton.
I love books.
Oprah, Ramseys, John and Patsy, 6-year-old JonBenet, and big brother Burke, age 9, they were the very picture of the good life. Wealthy, thanks to John's thriving computer business.
Patsy was a high society.
That's the beauty queen. That is a West Virginia beauty queen. That says a lot about West Virginia, though. Dance West Studio later got in trouble throwing rave parties.
Woman from Atlanta who knew how to decorate her house. John was a smart guy who had just been nominated or voted as Entrepreneur of the Year. So really the two of them were high society for Boulder.
Patsy had just beaten ovarian cancer and was celebrating her 40th birthday. This was a Christmas that promised to be as merry and bright as the Ramseys video greeting card.
We'd like to welcome you to our home and wish you a very Merry Christmas.
She decorated that place with Christmas trees in every room.
Family friend Pam
I am not fond of people like this. So I'm just saying, I've dealt with people like this. In general, I do not mesh well with people like this.
She was a Southern belle. Everything was about entertaining.
You say neither, and I say neither.
Patsy always liked to be in the limelight, and she was in the pageant system.
Let's throw the whole thing off. This is an interesting item I'd like you to see.
The name JonBenet was a fanciful hybrid of her father's, JonBenet.
Pigtails.
I find something very weird about already having a namesake and needing to make a female namesake. I mean, there's something weirdly narcissistic about that.
Beautiful smile.
In my opinion.
I mean, she was just a mischievous,
when they first
fun
met,
little girl.
Well, no, I mean, also, we're talking West Virginia. Or they didn't meet in West Virginia, did they? Yeah, maybe they did. They did meet in West Virginia. I don't know what you know about West Virginia, but...
At the age of 4, she began following in her mother's footsteps.
This is so fucking weird. I do not like this family. Like, I am not fond of this family.
That
I just don't
Christmas
think
night
they
of
did it.
1996, the Ramsey family had been out at a party at a friend's house. As they would tell Barbara Walters in an interview several years later,
They met in
they got
Atlanta?
home
Okay.
well after dark.
JonBenet was asleep when we arrived home. We took her to bed, got Burke to bed, set the alarm, and went to sleep.
Before dawn the next morning, Patsy was the
Where'd they meet, church?
first one up. As she headed down this spiral staircase, something catches her eye. Several pieces of paper.
There were 3 pages neatly laid across one of the rungs of the stairway.
Pages
so
scrawled.
They were neatly laid across the stairwell, like they were restaged in the picture.
With a handwritten, heart-stopping message. It was a ransom note.
Of all of the evidence left behind, that ransom note is the most baffling.
Reporter Diane Diamond has covered the story from the beginning. She says the author of the ransom note seemed to know a lot about the family. The demand for $118,000 was close to the exact amount of John Ramsey's bonus that year.
A ransom note is not that long. A ransom note says, I have your child, I want $1 million.
So it was very innocuous. So maybe there's nothing about it. I dated, for a little bit, I dated somebody 15 years younger.
I'll call you later. This is 2.5 pages long.
But they were 29.
Whoever does that.
I just remember when I read, we have your daughter, this overwhelming fear. And I just dashed back up those stairs as fast as I could and pushed her door open.
And then?
And then I just screamed for John.
JonBenet had vanished.
We are kidnapping. Hurry, please explain to me what's going on. Are you Patsy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God! Please. I'm sending an officer over, okay? Please. You know how long she's been gone? No, I don't. Please, we just got out and she's right here. Oh my God, please.
The call was made to 911, and within 2 or 3 minutes, Patsy Ramsey's on the phone to her friends and neighbors. Come on over.
John was also making calls.
Okay, I do find this strange that you would invite them over. I do find it strange. But also, what I want to pay attention to is how the accumulation of phrase choices, like the way she says it, is insinuating something suspicious. I find it strange, but why it would be suspicious is no more suspicious than why cops would show up in the front of a house in a squad car with a kidnapping ransom note.
He said, they've got her. What do you mean they've got her? They've kidnapped JonBenet. She's gone.
And people were streaming through that house. They were in the kitchen. They were in the living room.
Are we including the cops in those people? Are we including the advocate in these people? Are we including the CSI people? I mean, they only discuss the mistakes the family made to hurt the scene.
They're all talking. They're passing the ransom note around.
The police should have secured that scene by telling everybody, get out. I'm sorry, this is a crime scene.
It was just one of many mistakes police...
So you hear one quick mention, the police should have done this. But the Ramseys, when they didn't do the same thing, it's uber suspicious.
...made that day. The first detective on the scene also did something that would radically compromise the case.
Linda Arndt tells the restless John...
Okay, so we know Linda Arndt physically touched and moved the body herself. But listen to how they phrase this.
Why don't you look around the house, see if anything is missing or it looks strange. Start at the top and go to the bottom. But he didn't do that. He went to the basement first, where, of course...
She didn't say, start at the top and go to the bottom. She said, search the house from top to bottom. That is a turn of phrase, which means look at everything. Turp break, nice. Oh, it means look at everything, right? But she just framed it as she said, start at the top and go to the bottom, and he didn't listen.
Tells the restless John, why don't you look around the house, see if anything is missing or it looks strange. Start at the top and go to the bottom. But he didn't do that. He went to the basement first, where, of course, whoa, he finds his daughter's body.
You see how she does this? This is so misleading and nefarious. Is this who the Ramseys, did they sue ABC?
I saw her lying on the floor with a white blanket. Her hands were tied above her head. She had tape over her mouth. Her eyes were closed.
And lo and behold, when John Ramsey finds the body, you now have John Ramsey at the crime scene.
John Ramsey picked that little girl up, took the tape off of her mouth, and dragged her upstairs in his arms. And then the coup de grace. He grabs a blanket, which is full of who knows what kind of contaminants, and throws it over the body.
So we're not discussing that the police were so inept that it was John Ramsey that found the body. We're going to focus not on Karen Arndt moving the body. We're going to only focus on what our suspect did. Like, you could claim Karen Arndt is more suspicious than the Ramseys. She's trained in investigations. She moved the body, so did John. So if John's suspicious, so is Arndt. He put the blanket down. She didn't remove it or do anything about it. He found the body. She told him to go find the body. She said, go find me evidence. You're restless. You are being weird because you're not just sitting crisscross applesauce like I am. What was Karen doing? What was Linda doing for those like 4 hours she was alone? Well, 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 3 hours.
Right then and there, the police investigation was tainted.
So listen, it was only because of what John Ramsey did. It wasn't tainted because of the dereliction of duty by the cops. It wasn't tainted because the cops traipsed all over the place and didn't do their job. It wasn't tainted because Arndt moved the body and they never searched the house. But Arndt also knew there was no break-in, so it had to be the Ramseys. And she was afraid he was going to shoot her. Why? Because
JonBenet had been strangled with a length of cord, a vicious homemade weapon known as a garrote. She was hit on the head with enormous force, and there was evidence of sexual abuse.
I knelt next to her and I leaned down to her face. And John leaned down opposite me.
In her 1999 interview, Detective Arndt seemed to suggest to Elizabeth Vargas that in that moment, she was afraid of John.
I knew at 1:12 that there was no break-in and the Ramseys did it. Now, granted, 10 minutes before, I didn't know there was a murder. But now I know because John found the body after calling the cops to find them. I knew immediately there was no break-in and that he did it. But I also don't understand why he wouldn't just talk to us. We knew he did the murder. Why wouldn't he just come confess?
John Ramsey.
And we had a nonverbal exchange that.
Remember, this is what they chose to present us with. They've not chosen to actually give any credibility to any of the pieces of evidence that absolve them. Even when they mention it, they just go right by it.
I will never forget. And he asked if she was dead. And I said, yes, she's dead. And as we looked at each other, I remember, and I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting, I've got 18 bullets.
Why did you do that?
Because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up.
Why would they call the cops if he was going to murder the cops? Why would he find the body and bring the body upstairs instead of just say, I didn't find it? Why not search that room? Like, what kind of criminal mastermind are these people? They wanted to cover up a crime, so they staged this elaborate crime scene and then hurried up and called the cops, assuming the cops would be so negligent and derelict that they wouldn't find the body. And then to continue the ruse, they found the body and brought it to the cops and said, we found her. Is she alive? Proof John did it and that he was going to murder me too.
When Patsy Ramsey saw her daughter's body, she collapsed.
I knelt down over her. And
it's unbelievable. And nobody questioned her. Why don't I see a journalist go, under what suspicion was he going to pull out a gun and murder everybody in the house? If it was suspicious, why did he find the body and you cops didn't? But they don't want that. This is what I'm saying. These people and the cops are why the cops didn't solve it, because they have no interest in solving it. They have interest in being correct about their immediate assumptions. And then they need to pretend they're correct because if they find the real killer, what's that going to look like?
Just laid my body on her body and my cheek.
None of these people want to find the killer. They want the Ramseys to confess. Anybody that wanted to find a killer and prove the case, they were attacked by the Boulder police.
Against her cheek, and it was cold. And I just kept saying, no, no, you know, ask God. Ask God to raise her.
The kidnapping had just turned into a murder. Speculation about possible suspects begins immediately, and no one can be ruled out.
I know who killed JonBenet. There's no doubt in my mind who killed JonBenet.
I won't say who killed JonBenet, but I knew from the way John Ramsey acted. And when John Ramsey was next to me, I grabbed my gun because I didn't know if we were going to make it out alive. We were going to have a crazy shootout here in Boulder. And I knew immediately that the guy I was looking at, who I won't say, who's JonBenet's father, I knew immediately he did it. Not only did the cops do this, but the media fucking did it too.
And the grand juror who thinks he knows too. Stay with us.
So they're going to reveal who the grand juror believes killed, right?
2020 continues.
The evening of December 26th. Earlier that day, JonBenet's body was found, and the street outside was quiet.
They brought JonBenet's body out past the candy canes that were decorating the front of the house, and there were only like 2 reporters outside to capture that. And then the storm happened.
JonBenet Ramsey, the little girl in Colorado, was murdered.
Beauty queen JonBenet.
JonBenet's murder has frightened residents of Boulder.
This case had everything. It had a beautiful little girl murdered, found in her home, her parents as suspects, videotape of her.
FYI, Dan Abrams, this guy, he started Mediate, the online publication website.
Beauty pageants.
Where really all he does is collate other people's articles and publish them like they're his.
It touched every parent's heart. This was a child who was put to bed by her parents and never woke up. That's every parent's nightmare.
Hundreds of reporters descended on the small city of Boulder, including Craig Lewis of the supermarket tabloid The Globe. His marching orders were clear.
When the beauty pageant pictures came out and they put JonBenet on the cover of the magazine, they sold an extra 500,000 copies a week. They said, we want a story a week, every week. We don't care what the story is. We just want to put JonBenet's picture on the cover.
Those pageant videos raised eyebrows, but for some, so did the Ramseys' behavior. Carol McKinley is a veteran Colorado reporter.
John Ramsey got on the phone right after his daughter's body was found to his pilot.
Agreed. This one bugs me. This one has always bugged me and will always bug me.
I'm out of town. JonBenet's body's lying under the Christmas tree.
It was reported that shortly after you found your daughter's body, that you called the pilot of your plane to arrange a flight to Atlanta. Is that true?
I did. Police took the house over. We had nowhere to go. We wanted to go.
No. See, that makes it. We had nowhere to go. You literally had like 5 friends in your house that day, but you had nowhere to go. That's malarkey.
They didn't want to talk to the police. They lawyered up right away.
That's not true. They did talk to the police.
The Ramseys agreed to give handwriting, hair, and blood samples. Still, they refused formal interviews with the police.
They refused a specific interview after they already talked to the police and realized that the police were coming after them. Also, I guess somebody in the police department tipped off an attorney to tell them that. That's a weird thing, too.
Police. At this point, they haven't interviewed the mother or father. Not surprisingly, they're still very grief-stricken. They've not been in any kind of condition to be interviewed.
There was no evidence of a break-in. There was no jimmying on the front door. There was no
jimmying on the front door. Okay.
Back door crashed in.
There was no back door crashed in. So there were no obvious signs of break-in, so obviously there was no break-in. Even though there's no obvious signs of DNA of the Ramseys, there's no obvious signs of it. So scientifically, there's evidence it was somebody else. But also, we didn't really search the house well enough to find the girl, but we know there was no break-in in any of the 100 entries.
And there were 4 people in that house, and 1 died overnight. So everyone inside was a suspect.
There you go. There was no break-in. So it had to be a Ramsey. I mean, we're almost 13 minutes in, and they've soft blamed the Ramseys, what, a half a dozen times already?
I think the primary reason the focus so quickly turned to the Ramseys was you had that ransom note. Who would write a 3-page...
What makes Patsy more likely to write that letter than a stranger? Like, what makes Patsy more likely than like an actual murderer?
Rambling ransom note.
Now, Dan Abrams, to his credit, doesn't say this means Patsy did it. But 2020 is using Dan Abrams' full explanation to frame this as in, it seems like Patsy would do it.
And someone trying to cover their tracks who was in the house.
When you realized that you two were the prime suspects, what did you think? What did you feel? What did you say?
Well, we were outraged. We were shocked. How could they think that? We were a normal family.
You just can't believe it. I mean, we're suffering from having lost our child. And then for someone to accuse you, it's just, you can't believe that that would happen.
The book says that parents always did.
Why won't they just openly cooperate with the people accusing them of killing their daughter when they know they didn't do it?
And that became the conclusion. The tragedy of the police investigation was that it ended on December 26th.
Yep.
Their 15
at 1:15.
room mansion was now a crime scene. And what investigators soon learned was that some items used by the killer belonged to Patsy Ramsey. The ransom.
Also, they found some items used in the killing that did not belong to the Ramseys, correct? So somehow we can assume the Ramseys did it because some of the stuff came from the Ramseys' house, but also we know the Ramseys did it because stuff came from not in their house. So what did they do? They broke out into somebody else's house, stole their shit, and used it to commit a crime in their own house while not getting their own DNA on that stuff. Got it. So it was Patsy's fucking paintbrush, but Patsy's DNA wasn't on her own paintbrush. Got it. So somehow that you found DNA on the paintbrush, but also she wiped her DNA off of it.
Note and a second draft note, police say written on her notepad. The paintbrush used as part of the garrote came from Patsy's art supply.
Yes, but didn't have her DNA on it. Didn't have the DNA on it. So it was her brush, but didn't have her DNA. So that makes her suspicious. No, it exonerates her. The idea of the letter, how does that implicate her? Like, in what way does it implicate her? No way. You just believe it. You don't have anything scientific. So you want to use the polygraph, but you don't want to use the scientists who say it's a stun gun.
There were even fibers from the black and red check blazer she wore that night stuck to the duct tape covering JonBenet's mouth.
It was a red jacket all over the place downstairs, including on the underside of the duct tape, and that was very, very important. But there are problems because Patsy lived in that house. Would those fibers have been there anyway?
3 days after JonBenet died, the Ramseys held a memorial service for their daughter. She was buried in Atlanta beside her half-sister Beth, John's daughter by his first wife. But 24 hours later, they surprised everyone, breaking their silence on television.
Okay. Here's my opinion on this news conference that he did. I understand why the attorneys would want this to happen. Because when it comes to being falsely accused, like, let's say you're a streamer and somebody accuses you of like some grooming or pedophile shit. And then people are like, why won't you go talk to the person that accused you of it? Instead, you go out and you put out your own video. That seems suspicious. No, I mean, it makes complete sense that you wouldn't want to talk to the people accusing you and you want to explain yourself. Like, that makes sense. But the optics of it are fucking trash.
You wanted to talk now?
They held everybody off with layers of lawyers and friends, and then the next thing the police knew, they were on CNN.
If anyone knows anything, please, please help us.
And as a mother, my heart went out to this couple, but my journalistic brain said to me,
my heart said bad. My journalistic brain said they probably did that shit. I hope they sued. I hope they sued.
this isn't right. They should be talking to the police, not the public via cable.
That's not right. The police shouldn't be accusing a family without evidence.
Television network.
John Ramsey says it's an interview he now regrets doing.
5 days after the murder, you did an interview on CNN. Why did you do that?
We did it reluctantly. And
Canadians, you buy your milk in a bag. They buy their mayonnaise in a bag.
At the insistence of some friends who could see that we were being painted as guilty.
Back in Boulder, the tips were pouring in. At the time of JonBenet's murder, there were reportedly 38 registered sex offenders living within 2 miles of the family's home.
Well, yeah, because it's less waste.
Dozens of suspects, from family friends to the Ramseys' housekeeper, were checked out and eliminated.
Okay, wait.
Back in Boulder, the tips were pouring in. At the time of JonBenet's murder, there were reportedly 38 registered sex offenders living within 2 miles of the family's home. Dozens of suspects, from family friends to the Ramseys.
I'm going to say this. As much as I don't think the Ramseys did it, I don't think random pedophile did it either. You have to have known the family in some way, shape, or form. You have to have known that house. Random pedophile didn't do this. They're just like there's too many things that say the Ramseys didn't do it. There's too many things to say this was a stranger to the family.
His housekeeper were checked out and eliminated. Even JonBenet's 9-year-old brother Burke was questioned by a child psychologist. The video showed.
Yeah, for real, for real. You know what's funny? I'll tell you a funny story about the metric system. So before I got real into hockey, and then that was before the blood clots I have and can't play, I used to run. And a 5K, which for some reason we don't use metric, but all of our races do. All of our races do. It's 3.1 miles on the nose. And I was up at Red Rocks. Like if you go to Red Rocks during the day, there's just people hanging out there in the amphitheater. A lot of people use the stairs for exercise. And I saw some people running like you just snake all the way up the amphitheater. And I asked somebody, I was like, how long is the run? And she said 3.1 miles, almost 5K. And it just messed with my sense of accuracy so much it bothered me. It's like, no, that is exactly a 5K.
Shown for the first time this year on Dr. Phil.
What do you think?
Yeah.
I think someone took her very quietly and put her down quickly. And took her myself.
So he has no idea. He has no idea what happened. He assumes she was stabbed, and then he acts out the stabbing. So he literally has zero idea. It's not like he's speaking and doing something else. He literally has no idea.
I want to say something to the person or persons that took this baby from us. The list of suspects narrows.
Who's the guy that died on this day?
Soon there will be no one on the list but you.
But the months passed with no arrest, and the police had not yet asked the Ramseys all the questions they wanted. The couple's lawyers set conditions.
The Ramseys attorneys wanted all the questions. They said they wouldn't go in for an interview with the police because they didn't know what the police were going to ask.
They did speak with Alex Hunter regularly, didn't they? So it wasn't like they weren't willing to speak to authorities. They weren't willing to speak to the authorities that have already decided they're guilty of murder.
As the standoff continued, speculation about their motives grew ever more lurid. Was John Ramsey a pedophile?
Who's that?
Did Patsy...
Who's Cav Def? Sounds like a rapper. But I know what you mean. In Canada, we still talk about our height. Yeah.
murder her own daughter? The tabloids were having a field day, even speculating about a motive.
Let me give the motive that is ascribed to you. Okay. You were downstairs, maybe she came down, she said, Mommy, I wet my bed. You said, again, JonBenet, and you either pushed her or you hit her. You were exhausted, you were furious. You did it.
You have a child. Would you get up in the middle of the night and slaughter your child? We're parents. We love our children.
These are the two major motives. Either you sexually molested her or you snapped because primarily
Let me tell you
bedwetting.
something. I'm a cancer survivor of
Well, here's the thing about misdialing, okay? Here, I can tell you how easy that would be, right? Let me look at the digits on the phone just to verify that I'm correct, right? So you got to think about, you're talking about he called from a landline, correct? So if you have a nice phone, you could pre-program up to 20 numbers in your phone, right? You could pre-program up to 20 numbers, right? But the way you did that was you hit pound and then the 2-digit number, and it would auto dial. So a lot of people would put emergency numbers as like the first 5, let's say, and then you'd have other people. So he very easily could have been trying to call whoever number 11 was, and instead of pound 11, he hit 911 because it was a party. He probably had a few drinks. I'm creating a scenario that makes it extremely plausible that he did it, hit pound 911 or hit pound 11 to dial somebody. He's thinking they're going to answer. 911 answers, and he hangs up. Would you be like, oh, sorry, 911, I dialed the wrong number?
Stage 4 cancer. John has lost a child in an automobile accident. That completely changes your outlook. When you were standing on the brink of death with a terminal illness, your priorities suddenly line up.
He said he was calling a relative. Exactly. The relative that was probably number 11.
In a row, and you know exactly what the important things are in life. And bedwetting is totally insignificant.
Did either of you for a moment suspect each other?
No, absolutely not for a microsecond.
The Ramseys insisted that an intruder had broken into their house.
Does it sound possible that a killer would sit for hours and hours in your house?
That house was so rambling. There were so many hiding places. Really? He could be hidden for a week and we wouldn't find him.
Yo, what? White Eagle Underground. Okay, let me search that real quick. I can't copy the text in the chat. Why? Let me go to the actual chat and do it. No, it won't let me. It won't, oh wait, what if I? No, it won't let me. God damn it! I guess I can just type it. It's not very long. What a fucking lazy ass. White Eagle Underground. What's the White Eagle Underground? You still can't get to the Discord. Leave a comment. Well, how's that our paywall? I don't know. You can email me, probably. Kevin at Life and Weed, all one word. Life and Weed.
When we come back,
I don't care what you're talking about.
the explosive interrogation tapes. Authorities ask some hard questions, but the Ramseys push back.
If you're on Twitch, you can whisper it to me. You can send it to me in Discord.
I'm talking about scientific evidence.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific.
You said you have to get your computer back before you can do Discord.
Go back to the damn drawing board.
So we did. Next.
So here's what's funny. the way she behaves is how I would behave.
He could be hidden for a week and we wouldn't find him.
When we come back,
I don't care what you're talking about.
the explosive interrogation tapes. Authorities ask some hard questions, but the Ramseys push back.
I'm talking about scientific evidence.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board.
So we did. Next, does the handwriting point to a suspect?
So this is Patsy's handwriting. This is the ransom note, right?
Stay with us.
Wait, what are you talking about? Suzanne Stein. Hold on. It is said he was trying. Okay. Suzanne Stein, Patsy's pit bull, sent to the Popo away on the 23rd. Sent the Popo away. Okay. Who is Susan Stein, though? Now, this is a good example. This handwriting thing.
2020 continues.
Whoever killed JonBenet Ramsey left a treasure trove of clues, starting with the body itself, a massive skull fracture, as well as that awful garrote. The whole scene left seemingly staged. But of all the evidence, the ransom note was perhaps the most controversial.
What has thrown great suspicion on you, Mrs. Ramsey?
And that's why when Barbara Walters interviewed the Ramseys, everyone wanted to hear, how would Patsy respond to allegations she wrote it?
This has been inconclusive, but the similarity of the handwriting is the strongest piece of evidence implicating you.
Well, if that, again, yeah. She says it herself.
If that's the strongest, then there's not much of a case, because
that's
we have
it. I'm
had
good.
handwriting experts to look at my handwriting as well. And on a scale, I believe, of 1 to 5, with 5 being a totally incomplete match, I was rated at a 4.5. So there's very...
Okay, that is true. That at least some of the people, or one of the person that use the exact science of handwriting analysis. We can't trust DNA, but handwriting analysis. So the exact science, they said, yeah, it's really on a 1 out of 10, 10 being it is her, it's like a 1.1. So you could say, statistically, she wasn't ruled out and make it sound like she might have done it. Or you can be as nefarious as 2020 was here.
Very little.
In fact, at least 6 handwriting experts agreed that John Ramsey could be...
At least 6 agreed Ramsey could be excluded.
...eliminated as the author of the note, and that Patsy Ramsey probably did not write it either. But handwriting analysis is not an exact science, and at least one expert has a...
So 6 said it wasn't. 1 said it was her. And so we're going to talk to the one that said it was her. Right? Here we are, 20 minutes in, and they're not going to talk to the 6 that said it wasn't her. They chose the one that says it was her.
A very different opinion.
Professionally speaking, how certain are you that Patsy Ramsey wrote this ransom note?
It's highly probable that she wrote the ransom note.
It's highly probable. So everybody else said it's probably not her. And 2020 was like, we're going to hire the one that agrees with us.
Sina Wong has testified in more than 60 trials.
She has testified in more than 60 trials.
She says she compared that ransom note with more than 100 samples of Patsy Ramsey's handwriting. She created these charts.
First of all, here are some similarities.
Claiming she found substantial similarities with the way certain letters were formed, such as these A's.
And so you will see that just with the A's, the ransom note writer has 4 different variations of the letter A, and then Patsy Ramsey uses the same variation of the 4 different types of A's.
In total, she says she found over 200 similarities in the writing, including...
And one of those 6 experts was from the Secret Service. I guess I can just my VPS and give direct download links in your Discord. Yeah.
Including unique ways letter combinations were formed.
On the first example, you'll see that when the letter T and E are written together, they connect, they touch. And on the second one, it's called a misplaced capital. There's a capital L in the middle of it.
I don't know if you can post anything on in the YouTube comments, and there's no back end DMs in YouTube.
Will, and you'll see that there's a
So
capital
this
L
is
at the end of
Patsy's
it.
handwriting. This is the
ransom note.
note.
Right. When the word unharmed is written, you'll see that the A, that this portion of it is up above. It's higher than the hump of the H, and that happens in both.
Yeah, and you look at this, and it looks nothing like this. So that's proof. This looks exactly like this. I mean, how can you not see that, Rorschach?
Cases.
But Wong's analysis, which she prepared in connection with a civil lawsuit against the Ramseys, was never allowed in court.
Man, they wouldn't even let it in civil court.
A federal judge concluded in 2003 she lacked the necessary credentials to present analysis.
She's not credentialed. Now, let's just think about what just happened here. 2020 said 6 people said it wasn't Patsy. 1 person said it was Patsy, and she's been determined not to be qualified to make that decision. So we're going to have her on as the one to break it down. And then we're just going to like skim over that she's not qualified to do what we just had her do.
Oh, that's greasy. That's really fucking greasy. Yeah, it's greasy. Greasy.
In that case. Nevertheless, it would be a long time before interrogators could formally ask the Ramseys about that note or anything else.
I'm talking about scientific evidence.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it.
The dingo killed my baby.
Frankly, extraordinary because
forensic psychiatrist.
Okay, look at now. Let's go to the next expert that they got. Right.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it.
what I see here is
What I see here. Okay, so he's gonna Kyle or Lightman, the same guy that the show that I like that does like the body language stuff. This guy is gonna do that. But what I'm gonna do, is I'm going to do the exact opposite and prove that exactly what he says, he could say the exact opposite.
Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it.
what I see here is really, frankly, extraordinary because
Forensic psychiatrist Steve Pitt had been brought in back then to advise detectives how to interrogate Patsy.
Never trust anybody with those bushy eyebrows.
she was a formidable interview subject.
He didn't do it.
She was a formidable interview subject. What does that imply? What does that, if you're a formidable interview subject, what does that mean? What are the implications in that? Just right away. Because I would say the detectives are probably formidable interviewers. She's a formidable viewee. What does that mean? Formidable. What does that mean? Unless you already have a preconceived notion of what she didn't give you.
I didn't do it. Bert didn't do it. We love that child, okay? We're not involved.
So I say direct eye contact, full speech, leaning forward to show she believes what she's saying. She's not leaning back, being defensive, making space. She's vehemently saying, I didn't kill my daughter. Go find a killer. Even when they lie and say they have evidence it was you. So I would say the detectives are working very hard to try to get her to slip up and say it wasn't her. And she's very staunchly and boldly leaning in their face and saying, I didn't do it. Go find the killer. Now, what does this guy say?
Read my lips.
This interrogation took hours and covered the entire case.
Patsy Ramsey is leaning in. She's right in his face. You seldom, if ever, see that.
Pitt says rather than being defensive in the interview, Patsy was on the attack.
She's being defensive. I didn't fucking do it. I didn't fucking do it. That's not defensive. That's attacking. Bullshit. You just showed her defending herself saying, I didn't fucking do it. How was she supposed to be defensive? I didn't do it. Why are you being so mean to me? Well, like, what are you fucking talking about, Bushy?
Anyone who watches any beauty pageant at all knows that you're in his face. You seldom, if ever, see that.
Pitt says rather than being defensive in the interview, Patsy was on the attack.
Anyone who watches any beauty pageant at all knows that we're watching people who are schooled in performing.
I'm not really seeing a performance. I just know her background, and she does performance, and that's how she's not admitting that she did this.
Not kill my child.
Because she's literally a criminal mastermind. They perfectly cleaned up and staged the scene, all from an accident, and somehow was able to write the note to make it not obvious she wrote it. She was able to get foreign DNA on the murder weapon. She was able to get objects that aren't from the house into the crime scene, and able to staunchly deny it in a long interview with cops, but also wouldn't cooperate with the cops.
I didn't have anything to do with it.
She's very feisty. She's very almost combative. And that doesn't mean she's guilty.
I mean, she's being accused of murdering her child, and they won't look at anybody else. Other than combative, what should she be? Submissive? Crying? What is the behavior that is the right multiple choice behavior? Or is it any behavior you would say this?
But it doesn't mean she's innocent either.
I didn't do it.
The bottom line is, there's nothing there that they could use to say, aha, we've got you.
Both Patsy and, in a separate interview, John Ramsey deny anyone in the family killed JonBenet.
When they're asked about, well, who do you think might have done this? If it wasn't you, who? They start throwing names out there for the police to follow up on.
I've thought about almost.
So if they give names, they're distracting. Even though I'm sure he was asked, who could have done this?
Everybody we know, because you just don't trust people we know.
Perhaps the biggest supporter of an alternative suspect came to town from Colorado Springs. Lou Smith was a renowned homicide investigator.
So, but we can dismiss him. We brought him on because he's the expert. But we can dismiss him because, you know, the expert didn't agree with us.
And he dug into the crime scene photos.
So we had to find out what these marks were.
He saw marks on the body he didn't think had been adequately explained. He determined they came from a stun gun. Since it would have been unnecessary for the Ramseys to use a stun gun to get JonBenet out of bed, he eliminated
and also that they didn't have a stun gun.
Them as suspects. Smith honed in on a picture of this open window and a suitcase below.
When I first seen that photograph, I thought, uh-oh, looks like somebody could have got in here.
I mean,
when he saw what looked like a
literally, how can they say there was no signs of a break-in when there was an open window on the floor the girl was murdered on? Like, in what reality could you say there were no signs of a break-in? None. Forget the open door, but there were no signs of a break-in, even though there was an open window with glass in the basement. How? We know the Ramseys did it because who else could have done it?
Print and a small piece of glass on top of the suitcase. He suspected that's how the killer got in.
I'll show you how easily it can be done.
Smith demonstrated climbing through that window was not only possible, it wasn't that difficult. But even if someone could have sneaked in, the big question remained, who?
Even if somebody could have sneaked in, who? So we know it was the Ramseys because nobody snuck in. We told you that already. Now we're saying somebody could have snuck in, but like who and why? When the Ramseys could have just done it.
There were a whole host of other possible suspects, ranging from neighbors to known criminals to friends of the Ramseys.
But a few people would get special attention, including the man who played Santa at the Ramseys' Christmas parties.
What a perfect suspect. Santa Claus, wouldn't...
And he didn't bring him in so that Lou could exonerate the parents. He brought him in to investigate it, which Lou said he thought it was the parents. This is what...
Griffin, what do you plan to do about crime in our city?
A lot. Because that's what Jesus wants. 9/11 was bad.
I agree with that.
God, I can't believe how easy this is.
Mrs. Griffin, what are your plans for cleaning up our environment?
9/11.
JonBenet.
Mrs. Griffin, what about our traffic problem?
9, 11.
So there's something to understand about the temperature between the Boulder police and Alex Hunter and the DA's office. A lot of this stuff gets framed as if the only reason these things were going on is because of the Ramsey case. That Hunter didn't like the cops and the cops didn't like Hunter because of the Ramsey case. The reality is the cops and the DA's office, who the DA is elected by the people. So the cops weren't elected by the people, the DA was over and over and over again. So at least that's what the people wanted. And basically the DA's office was trying to focus on reducing recidivism and focusing on not punishment and incarceration, but on I can't think of the word I'm looking for. That allows them an opportunity to like earn their way back into society, instead of like, how can we punish you? It's how can we like handle this in a way that allows you to become a productive member of society? Because if we just put you in jail and have a trial, it's going to be a bigger effect than if we just plead this to something and put you on a path to improvement, something like that. So the cops thought that was fucking disgusting. And they thought, why should we bother to do our job if you're not going to put them in prison? So the cops wanted people punished, and that's all they cared about. And Hunter pled everything out, and people didn't get anywhere near the punishment that the cops thought they should. So there was already this ongoing mass differentiation of tactics and opinion, and they hated each other. They hated each other. Why should we police if they're not going to prosecute the crime? We hear that in today's world. So they weren't on the same page. So the reason that Hunter may do this in a regular way is that he believes that the police don't do their job. That he had experience of them taking things into their own accord. So am I saying Hunter was fine? No. Am I saying the cops were fine? Obviously not. But there was more going on than just like Hunter was trying to hide the Ramseys, which is how it's being presented.
That have just tied it all up in a nice little bow.
But nothing would be tied up neatly in this case.
7 News has uncovered exclusive information about DNA test results.
Test results on a spot on JonBenet's underwear revealed both her own DNA and DNA of an unknown male. And that unknown male didn't match John Ramsey, his son Burke, or any of the other possible intruder suspects so far. Regardless, many in the police department still thought there was more than enough evidence for the district attorney to prosecute the Ramseys. This man was one of the only people to ever...
We've come to my favorite... wait. I think we've come to my favorite part.
...see that evidence.
Based on the evidence you were presented, do you feel you know who killed JonBenet Ramsey?
I highly suspect I do.
Next, you will hear from this
let's cut to commercial.
Who has never spoken publicly about
Surely the grand juror is going to name a name, right?
He saw. What did he
That's
think?
all that matters. What's the name?
2020 continues.
She enjoys painting surroundings.
Little girl, big mystery. Even after nearly 2 years of investigation, the murder of JonBenet Ramsey remained unsolved.
She'd like to become an Olympic ice skater.
It was looking like the killer might never get caught. Until in late 1998, the wheels of Boulder justice jumped into overdrive. grand jurors
Severed, I just realized you're like an hour behind.
arrived at the Boulder County Justice Center this morning, the DA presented the case to a grand jury of 8 women and 4 men. Police have been pushing for this day for months.
We're at a grand jury stage where the key element is surprise.
No one is talking about what's going on in the courtroom, and we don't expect a lot of information to come out. Grand jury proceedings in Colorado and elsewhere are secret. The penalties for revealing testimony or evidence can be severe, even jail time. In spite of that threat, nearly 2 decades later, one member of that jury has agreed to talk to 2020.
Because of the noise, let's take a 20-second light.
Given the possible repercussions, we agreed to alter his voice and put his face in shadow.
Before you were a grand juror, what did you know about the JonBenet Ramsey case?
Very little. I saw that there was a little girl dressed up with, in my opinion, a sexual persona, and it disgusted me, and I turned off the TV.
Over the course of more than a year, he and the other grand jurors grappled with the evidence and testimony from dozens of witnesses.
I was on Top Chat, so I wasn't even getting the fucking chat. I'm so sorry.
He even took a field trip to the Ramsey home on 15th Street.
In the basement where she was found, it was actually kind of an obscure layout, and you had to go into, you come in a stairwell, and you had to go into another room to find the door that was closed. It was a very eerie feeling.
Now, the fact that this is a grand juror, we have zero way of verifying. So they've already, like, cherry-picked, like, faulty scientists in 2 different genres of expertise as their people. And now we have a blacked-out, voice-changed juror. You're home now? Re-sing Firefox. Well, I didn't have you on, I didn't have it on live chat, so I missed the Khalid equals Arab name equals terrorist. I missed that. And so when you wrote Hamas, I was like, did I miss something? And then I saw the diazepam thing, and I was like, oh, we're talking about the mentally ill guy.
A grand jury does not decide guilt or innocence, only whether there is probable cause to charge someone with a crime.
Jonathan, is that who that was? That guy?
It was a very eerie feeling. Like someone had been killed here.
A grand jury does not decide guilt or innocence, only whether there is probable cause to charge someone with a crime.
Probable cause means there's enough for us to move forward. The difference between getting an indictment versus proof beyond a reasonable doubt is a huge difference.
Was there enough evidence to indict John and Patsy Ramsey of a crime?
Based upon the evidence that was presented, I believe that's correct.
But if the case went to trial, did he believe that the Ramseys would be convicted?
No.
No doubt.
So this entire thing, they bring somebody on that's been excluded as an expert, who all the experts say she's wrong. They bring on some random body language guy to say, look at her lean forward. Right? And then this guy comes on and said, we indicted them, but there's no way they would have been convicted in a trial. And their whole narrative is the Ramseys did it. Like, everything they show is that the Ramseys didn't do it and they wouldn't have got convicted and you shouldn't have charged them. Which is also, why won't they just confess?
No way that I would be able to say beyond reasonable doubt this is personal.
Yeah.
So
but if the case went to trial,
this guy that they're claiming heard all the evidence said there's no way I would have indicted him and convicted him on that evidence.
Did he believe that the Ramseys would be convicted?
No.
No doubt.
There's no way that I would be able to say beyond reasonable doubt this is personal.
There was no smoking gun.
Not to the point of knowing exactly what happened or exactly who was involved, no. And if you're a district attorney, if you know that going in, it's a waste of taxpayer dollars to do it.
Still, the grand jury handed up an indictment accusing John and Patsy Ramsey of not murder, but child abuse.
So they explained why they didn't move forward and then say, but still, they did move forward. Like, the order of operations here is there wasn't enough from what we put forward that they should have moved forward. But they frame it as this guy knows who did this and they indicted the Ramseys, which is exactly why this should have never been released.
Finding they allowed JonBenet to be placed in a situation which resulted in death.
Yeah, so basically they said they didn't protect her. That's what they could prove. They didn't protect her. Yeah, she was dead in the house. Point proven.
At least 9 of those jurors felt there was probable cause to believe.
At least 9 of 12. It wasn't even unanimous. 9 of 12.
That crime occurred. In saying that, they were also saying, I can't tell who did what. I'm not ready to say there's probable cause to believe that either John Ramsey or Patsy Ramsey intentionally and deliberately murdered their child.
After a year and a half
or did anything to their child.
Investigation, the stakes could not have been higher for the district attorney or the Ramseys.
We were prepared to drive to the sheriff's office, turn ourselves in, and be jailed. I had signed a custodial...
Just think about how unfair this is, right? Let's say he's guilty. Then he deserves every bit of this. But let's say he's not guilty. What does the world owe him? And that's fucked up.
Agreement that would put Burke in the custody of my brother.
We had to prepare in the event the worst happened. And that is a daunting thought. I mean, when you're packing your suitcase saying, well, what does one take when one might end up in jail?
But in an astonishing turn of events, the prosecutor nullified the findings of his own grand jury, the criminal justice equivalent of, oh, never mind.
I must report to you that I and my prosecution task force believe we do not have sufficient evidence to warrant the filing of charges against anyone who has been investigated at this time.
What made this case so unusual is that the grand jury did hand up an indictment on certain charges, and the district attorney decided not to prosecute.
And I remember John saying, now, maybe they'll go after the real killer.
Do you know how much evidence it takes to come up with an indictment? It's about this much. They found nothing in 13 months.
Like I said, the same media that says they should have charged them because they were indicted also says, but you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich.
Nothing that pointed to John or to me.
Then Governor Bill Owens was furious.
If I could speak to John and Patsy Ramsey, I'd tell them to quit hiding behind their attorneys, quit hiding behind their PR firm, come back to Colorado, work with us to find the killers in this case, no matter where that trail may lead.
What do you say to the governor?
I would say to Governor Owens, you've spent 3 years investigating my family. What are you going to do to find the killer of my daughter?
A mystery for some, less so for our mysterious juror.
Based on the evidence you were presented, do you feel you know who killed JonBenet Ramsey?
I highly suspect I do.
And who do you think that is?
I wish not to answer that question.
Now the investigation is about to...
So he didn't even say. I wouldn't prosecute him, and I think I know who did it. That... You've insinuated that's the Ramseys. Not the guy. The guy didn't insinuate it. The editing insinuated it. This is so fucking dishonest. Worst you ever heard of? Creepy and likely got paid to let some PETA sadist. Yeah, I struggle with that one, but I also, it's hard for me to say whether they know it or not, they don't know the killer. Like, I believe they know the killer, whether they know that or not. What reason, if they know why they're keeping it secret, it could be guilt, personal like responsibility because they have something to hide too. It could be anything. But I do not like the family. I do not like John. I do not like Patsy. I find Burke to be very odd. Like, there's nothing about them that I like identify with or agree with. Like, I don't agree with calling the friends right away. If you want to call them because you're freaking out, but calling them and having them come over, what are you doing? Like, there's so many things they did, and just the way they are, the pageants, the whole thing. I don't like them.
Leap ahead, detectives examining 20-year-old evidence under the microscope of the latest technology. Could it reveal a whole new theory of the JonBenet Ramsey murder case? Stay with us. Remember this man? John Mark Carr, perhaps the most notorious of all.
I stopped here because I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, do they present the other side? We're 32 minutes into a 40-minute video. They have only presented that the Ramseys did it.
All the potential suspects.
I love JonBenet, and she died accidentally. No.
He was an American living in Thailand who had confessed to killing JonBenet, a school teacher by trade.
I mean, I suspect there's a possibility, whether they know it or not, I suspect, whether they know it or not, that they know who the killer is. They know the killer. The killer knows them. This isn't an internet day where you could go to LinkedIn and pay for somebody's full bio. Like, you needed the ransom note, you needed to know something about these people. The house, the way the crime worked, you needed to know something about this house.
He was picked up in Bangkok in 2006. He had apparently missed the class on the right to remain silent.
Yeah. Sorry. Allegedly is just an email. It's from
Well, like you heard, he fucked an ostrich, right?
He what?
He fucked an ostrich.
Allegedly.
Were you playing with her? What happened?
Her death was an accident.
So you were in the basement?
Yes.
But back in Boulder, that bombshell was a bust because despite his confession, his DNA didn't match that spot on her underwear. Carr's confession was considered false. In fact, DNA has routinely been the Achilles heel for Boulder law enforcement. And as recently as this week,
District Attorney's Office confirming that they will retest some old evidence in the case next year.
DNA was back in the news again.
You can find things out with...
Here's a... Hey, Alexis Rich, is he female to male trans? Reich. Is he female to male? I'm looking it up. I'm looking it up in another window. There was something that just happened though that I wanted to say.
Where Carr's confession was considered false.
Oh, here's my question. And maybe for the other confessions also. I believe there was a heavy concentration of pedos in Boulder. And that there may have been attachment to the church. And that that Ramseys in some way, shape, or form may have known about or been a part of the group. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying they abused other children. I'm saying the pageant world and Boulder and these potential pedo rings, they're possible. It's possible. So, yeah, like, that's crazy, dude. That is crazy. So when it comes to these confessions, we know these people share images, share stories. They communicate in forums. So it seems plausible. Oh, it's a male name. Maybe Russian. And it would be Alexei, not Alexis. Anyway, if fuck, what was I saying? I keep getting distracted. I'm stoned now. Oh, if there's like a pedophile ring and Mark Carr is a pedophile, just like, say, Gary Oliva or somebody else, he could know. He could know. It's ma'am.
In fact, DNA has routinely been the Achilles heel for Boulder law enforcement. And as recently as this week...
Wait, what did she say?
DNA didn't match that spot on her underwear. Carr's confession was considered false. In fact, DNA has routinely been the Achilles heel for Boulder law enforcement. And as recently as this week...
So, it's not weird to dismiss DNA for John Mark Carr. Or it's not weird to depend on the same DNA that excludes John Mark Carr, but it is weird to depend on the DNA that excludes the Ramseys. That's what's been presented in this.
District Attorney's Office confirming that they will retest some old evidence in the case next year.
DNA was back in the news again.
You can find things out with certain analysis now that a year ago, 2 years ago, you couldn't have done. We have an obligation on every case to make sure that we're doing up to the date. And
wait, was that the Boulder professor? because I was reading papers from that guy and then got distracted and stopped.
Analysis. We're going to do that in Ramsey as well.
On Wednesday, the current district attorney, Stan Garnett, announced the new test will tap into the FBI's database of more than 15 million known offenders.
Alexis Navalny.
Unless a match is someday made.
Or that's Alexei Navalny, not Alexis.
The cloud of suspicion may never leave the Ramseys like they thought it had back in 2008.
From Quebec.
Authorities investigating the death of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey have officially
Fuck, I hate Quebec.
Cleared her parents.
Just kidding.
Then District Attorney Mary Lacey said a new round of DNA tests revealed skin cells, this time on JonBenet's leggings. This so-called touch DNA matched the spot on her underwear. Both were from the same unknown male, and as a result, she took a controversial step, sending a letter to John Ramsey, saying those in the family were no longer under any suspicion.
So every time an expert makes a determination based on DNA, if it points away from the Ramseys, it should be trusted and you should clear people. But if it points away from the Ramseys, you're wrong when you do it.
Cleared her parents.
Then District Attorney Mary Lacey said a new round of DNA tests revealed skin cells, this time on JonBenet's leggings. This so-called touch DNA matched the spot on her underwear. Both were from the same unknown male, and as a result, she took a controversial...
I think this is more Brianna Wu than hockey player. I think John Marcar seems more Brianna Wu than hockey player.
Step, sending a letter to John Ramsey, saying those in the family were no longer under any suspicion. And
one solved. Do you know who Brianna Wu is?
She publicly apologized for all they had gone through.
Both were.
We're certainly grateful for an acknowledgement that we are innocent. This was an intruder, which of course we've always maintained.
For the first time, the entire Ramsey family was seemingly cleared. But to this day, that conclusion has its critics.
Should the Ramseys have been exonerated by the DA based on this new touch DNA evidence?
No, there may be other reasons to exonerate them, but not from that touch DNA.
So don't eliminate him because of the DNA doesn't match him. Even though they just said you could eliminate Carr because the DNA didn't match.
Famed pathologist Dr. Michael Bodden questions District Attorney Mary Lacey's conclusion.
Brianna Wu comes from Gamergate and is also part of this political operation through Progressive Victory to pay streamers to do certain stuff. And they don't disclose it. They pretend that they're not involved with it while praising it and saying people should get involved with it while they're being paid by them and not disclosing it. And that's Brianna Wu from Gamergate to today. Also owns a super PAC that traffics in like over $1 million a year, I believe, with Cenk Uygur from TYT.
Her interpretation was faulty.
Because as much as the technology was a breakthrough, it could create red herrings too.
Finding skin cells and the concomitant DNA finding on an item of evidence doesn't necessarily mean that person committed the crime.
Dr. Lawrence Kobelinski,
Wait,
investigation.
What?
He apologized for all they had gone through.
Finding skin cells and...
questions District Attorney Mary Lacey's conclusion.
Her interpretation was faulty.
Because as much as the technology was a breakthrough, it could create red herrings too.
Finding skin cells and the concomitant DNA finding on an item of evidence doesn't necessarily mean that person committed the crime.
Yes, but that's not what was said. It didn't say we found their touch DNA, but we can't say they did the crime. You're doing the opposite. You're saying we didn't find their DNA. Which what? Means they might have been holding it? We could find DNA of somebody that might not have been involved. Multi-channel networks. Yeah, exactly. That's how I knew what it was. I knew what it was because I've studied multi-channel networks like Cicada and shit. Other people knew because they knew that people were getting paid. I recognized the dynamics of it against the support of other people. So this bullshit, what he answered was just because you have somebody's DNA doesn't say they did the crime. But the other side of that is if you don't find their DNA and you find other DNA, explain that. That they didn't wipe it off enough to get the other DNA, but they wiped it off to get their DNA off it. Get the fuck out of here.
Dr. Lawrence Kobelinski,
this is so manipulative.
Professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, says DNA from skin cells can be unreliable.
There are other...
Yeah, very simply, the easiest connection is a woman by the name of Lisa Clapier, also the White Rabbit. She's in the I Am cult and somewhat close, I guess, with Thomas. And I have a episode of her on TYT in 2014, right after Russia took over Crimea. And the entire show with Anna, 2 other guests, and Lisa Clapier is about how Russia's in the right for going in and taking Ukraine. It was all Russian propaganda, all of it.
Explanations for why a person's DNA ends up on an object through touch. For example, I shake your hand, I pick up your shed skin cells that way, and then I touch it.
You've got Cenk running for president saying Biden can't win, then recently coming out and saying he thinks he would vote for RFK over Biden, but he owns Rebellion PAC with Brianna Wu, who built an organization of streamers supposedly to help fucking Joe Biden get elected. So they both own a PAC and they're playing both sides of the table. That's a fucking LARP.
An object transferring your cells onto the object.
Yeah.
However, 2020 obtained the actual test results Lacey relied upon.
If they're not from JonBenet.
And took them to Professor Kovalinski to examine.
Some of these are organic. Like you look at people like Nick DeOrio, Augie, Turkey Tom, and that group, that commentary group, they have that type of multi-channel network, but it's like mutual benefit and real and pretty fairly like known about. But then you have these people doing alts and bots and shit like that, and that's nefarious bullshit.
And guess what? Despite the shortcomings, he agrees with the DA, Mary Lacey. The DNA from those leggings and the DNA from the underwear are most likely from the same unknown male.
It's a shame. There's a lot of stuff from Twitch that disappeared about that I did on Cicada because I didn't used to save stuff.
Ramseys.
I would not use the word match. I would prefer to use the word consistent with. This is not perfect, but there's enough information there to conclude that the family should have been exonerated.
Back in Boulder.
Okay, all right, my bad. There was enough to conclude the family should have been, right? That's what he said?
I would not use the word match. I would prefer to use the word consistent with. This is not perfect, but there's enough information there to conclude that the family should have been exonerated.
Should have been exonerated. So this entire episode has been about the Ramseys did it. And like, again, somebody, they didn't do it. The juror, they didn't do it.
Back in Boulder, Stan Garnett, who replaced Lacey as district attorney, says her exoneration letter means little going forward.
I even did a show about QAnon for like 2 seasons with a guy called No Q Incidences. And we did everything for like from Gamergate up through QAnon, Flynn, the Watkins. It was a good show. That was a good show.
Right. Our job is not to go around clearing people or not clearing.
My head was in a jar, floating in a jar like Futurama. This is pretty cool.
People. Our job is to review evidence.
And now with the DNA case reopened, maybe, just maybe, he'll get some new evidence to review. How likely is it?
Very unlikely. And the reason is because this case has been so thoroughly examined. It was so high profile. It's a very long shot this case will ever be solved.
See, I've lived a lot longer than Dan, fortunately, unfortunately, and things come up years later, decades later, that sometimes help solve old cases.
What does John Ramsey himself think? And where is he now?
Do you think the murderer will ever be found?
PeerTube. I always struggle to find stuff because the conspiracy distillery stuff is gone. His channels people don't leave videos up anymore. Yeah.
Checks back in. Stay with us.
There's no take backs. Well, you could undo an exoneration. It's not legally binding. They weren't exonerated when Jeopardy had been attached.
She is the little girl frozen in time. But had she lived, JonBenet...
I've gone back and I'm rewatching Aitken's documentary, Rumblefish's documentary.
It would now be a woman, 26 years old. It can be hard to imagine, especially for her father. He spoke to Barbara Walters last year.
Do you think about what kind of a woman she would have been?
Mostly I think of her as a 6-year-old child that I remember.
After JonBenet's death, John says Patsy devoted herself to raising Burke until she lost her battle with ovarian cancer in 2006.
She's an amazing person and very focused on Burke and what's best for Burke, and that became her life.
How is Burke doing today?
Burke is doing very well. I'm very proud of him.
Burke is now 29, a software engineer, and back in the headlines after an interview with Dr. Phil this fall, the first time he ever spoke publicly about the case.
Some people have speculated that your parents weren't protecting you, they were hiding you.
Yeah.
And that for this last 20 years, that you've been hiding out.
For the last 20 years, I wanted to grow up like a normal kid, which does not include like going in front of TV cameras.
After the murder, John lost his successful business and his millions. But in a life marked by loss, he has found a way to move on. 5 years ago, he remarried, and he's written a book called The Other Side of Suffering.
There's a number of elements that I think you have to come to grips with. One is forgiveness.
Forgive yourself or forgive the
both,
perpetrator?
Both. Why couldn't I have protected my daughter? Why didn't I check the locks better in the house? The other aspects, the killer, the police, all the people you have to forgive, that's a tough bridge to get over.
John Ramsey still holds out hope that the killer will be found.
You think the killer is still out there somewhere?
He's either out there dead or in prison. What I've been advocating is that anyone arrested for a felony should be DNA printed, just like they're fingerprinted. I was told by a chief of police that if we had such a law in place in this country, nationwide, we would solve 1,000 murders overnight.
But after 20 years, many who have studied the case see no signs that this enduring mystery will ever end.
I have to hope that JonBenet Ramsey gets her justice, but I can see this being a cold case that stays in the freezer forever.
So I just put in the chat one of the little blurbs I read. It said, investigative memorandum on the cult terror neo-Nazi group known as the Star Chamber and White Eagle Underground that Paul Schultz was said to be part of. The group consisted of high-level rogue... Oh, it wouldn't finish it. Fuck, where'd it go? High-level rogue intelligence agents in U.S. agencies as well as foreign terrorist operatives. We are a small foreign faction. We have your daughter. You know, the weird thing is, I think there's a John Ramsey that works for like Homeland Security in West Virginia. I don't know if it's John Andrew Ramsey, but I believe there's John Ramsey in West Virginia that works for like Homeland Security. And with all the shit about Diddy and whatnot coming out, so the idea that there couldn't be a pedophile ring, I mean, the church is a pedophile ring. Epstein and the occult pedophile rings. Like, there's so many things where it could be.
The Colorado.
All right, I'm sick of them. Fuck them. So now here's from Unsolved. This is Final Suspects Chapter 1. Christmas Tragedy. So I don't think we did any of these. We'll start with one. Now, if you want to catch these when they happen, I guess it's every Sunday. What time? What time do you do them? Because I only caught the end of it. But every Sunday, there's a new one of these being released for like the next, like 2 months? Still lives in Colorado. Seniors in Utah. So it's probably just a coincidence.
There's a note left in our daughter's drawer. A note was left in your daughter's drawer? How old is your daughter? 6 years old.
You know, I don't know how much interaction you have with Rumble or Aiken, but I am curious if that's going to come up in his documentary, because I'm the first hour was about like less spiritual, crazy stuff that I could follow, but it gets into like dragon cults and all kinds of weird stuff that's going to be real tough for me because I have no background in understanding any of this stuff.
Ron, 6 years old. How long ago was it? I don't know. I just have the note. And my daughter's did the say who took her. What? Is the same gender? I don't know.
Now, I will say, I talked shit on 7 p.m. Eastern. I talked shit on previous thumbnails. This is a good title. And the reason is the black letters have two things to them. Like, there's a transparency to them, but also they have a white outline, which allows them to be read better, easier for the eye. I'm not a fan of script fonts, but this one's very easy. So yeah, and you don't want to use more than like 3 fonts max.
There's a ransom note here. It's a ransom note? It says FBTC. Victory.
In sec def
It was
tracks.
the infamously desperate call for help that has since been heard around the world. In the early morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey dialed 911 to report the apparent...
Oh, yeah, figures. Well, now you know how to do it. Now you know how to do it.
kidnapping of her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenet.
I owned a sign business for 7 years. And before that, I made a lot of marketing materials and been to like a bunch of seminars and shit for it. So yeah, there's like a lot of silly little rules. Now I never went to graphic design school, but I know how to make something readable.
From their home in an affluent area of Boulder, Colorado.
Okay, girl, this is buddy. I am, honey. Take a deep breath.
Now, who makes these? Are you just putting these back up, or who makes these?
Patsy.
I'd love to know more about your story. I haven't asked yet.
By the end of that day, the Ramseys found JonBenet's body in their own basement. The little girl was dead.
This was Boulder, Colorado. This was a little 6-year-old girl who had been tortured and murdered and left in her home. It was a town that didn't even have a homicide department because they didn't have homicides. It was horrifying.
For 23 years, the death of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey has been the most notorious and heartbreaking unsolved murder in American history. And despite thousands of police man-hours, unprecedented public interest, and a witch hunt directed at her parents, still, the ultimate question remains unanswered. Welcome to the killing of JonBenet Ramsey, The Final Suspects, hosted by me, Danielle Robay.
I'm Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet's mother.
This is Patsy Ramsey talking to the media in 1997.
I'm appalled that anyone would think that John or I would be involved in such a hideous, heinous crime. But let me assure you that
she's easy to not like.
I did not kill JonBenet. I did not have anything to do with it. I love that child with my whole of my heart and soul.
Over the next 12 installments, you are going to hear what may be the most exhaustive investigation into JonBenet's murder in decades, led by investigative reporter Doug Longini. Through his decades working this case, Doug Longini has...
Now, opposite of the fucking... opposite of the thumbnail that I said, this is something that drives me absolutely batty. The way us rudimentary people cut shit out. Like if we're going to cut it out this poorly, that's when you add like an outline so that you can hide that. Rumble's documentary does it, and all through this video I see it, and it hurts my eyeballs like off-tune music hurts your earballs.
Has become a trusted colleague to some of the most knowledgeable insiders.
But I'm also somebody that noticed the bubbles in the sign on windows of McDonald's and shit, so doesn't take much.
Talking to a very unlikely JonBenet expert from North Carolina. She goes by the single name Jameson.
So with Lou's list of suspects and our ability to actually collect DNA, we could actually move this case along significantly. We could actually have a breakthrough. What do you think?
We have a finite list now of Lou's best suspects.
They have cleared a couple of people, a few people,
But there's more to be done.
but there's a lot more to be done.
We will learn much more about Detective Smith's suspect spreadsheet in future episodes. But before diving into the investigation, we first need to go back to the beginning and the details of that awful December 26th morning, 23 years ago. This is JonBenet Ramsey expert, Jameson.
On December 26th, Patsy
I'll make you. I'll make. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's horrible. Look, I've been out of the sign business. I sold my shop in 17, I think, maybe 18, and I still will be somewhere and I'll see a sign, and automatically I start figuring out how it was made, what materials, how it's installed. Sometimes if I'm not sure, I'll go over, I'll look at the side of the sign, I'll touch it. I'm fucking retarded, like full on retarded. But I might make you some thumbnails, because I think if you put different thumbnails on your videos, you'll get more clicks on them.
woke up sometime between 5:30 and 6. And
Especially as people come and watch the drip that you're giving, they'll go back and watch old ones with attractive thumbnails.
she said John was already up. She went down the spiral stairs, headed toward the kitchen to make coffee for her and John. The next actions happened really fast. She sees 3 sheets of paper spread out across one of the bottom steps.
You don't have to use them, but I might make it anyway, because I already have her cut out.
She steps over it. She turned around to read it, and when she got a few sentences in and it said, "We have your daughter," she suddenly realized what was going on. She ran to JonBenet's room, saw the empty bed, and started screaming for John. John had left the shower, and he came down, and he immediately told her to call 911, which she did.
Patsy Ramsey's 911 call, some of which you heard at the beginning of this episode, has been the subject of 2 decades worth of conjecture and debate. Here's former Supervisory Deputy United States Marshal Mark McClish.
Patsy Ramsey had called 911 when she
Oh my God, it looks like Ted Cruz fucked George Bush.
found the ransom note. And so the 911 operator asked her what's going on, and then Patsy gave their address. So then the second time, the operator said, "What's going on there, ma'am?" And Patsy responded, said, "We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please."
The cops come to the house, then about 6 o'clock in the morning, they search the house and do not find the girl.
My name is Robert Whitson, and I was on-call detective supervisor in 1996 when the JonBenet Ramsey case occurred. It was approximately 6 o'clock or so in the morning. I received a call that there was a kidnapping, and so I got hold of 2 detectives who responded, and then I responded. I went to the police department and met with the night shift supervisor and also started making some phone calls. So I didn't get up to the house. It was probably around 9 o'clock in the morning.
Almost from the moment Boulder police responded to Patsy Ramsey's 911 call, catastrophic mistakes were made. Although the case was still the kidnapping, normal police protocol would dictate that the Ramseys' house should have been treated as a crime scene. As Detective Whitson explains, it was not.
When I went in the house, I actually was a little surprised because there were 3 or 4 adults standing there. And I asked one of the detectives, "Who are these people?" And he told me that they were friends of the Ramseys. At that point, one of the mistakes I made was I should have took those people someplace else, either to the police department or to one of the other neighbors' homes that lived nearby. But I should have had them removed from the house. At that point, of course, we're working under the assumption that this appeared to be a legitimate kidnapping. And also, the movie Ransom had just come out a couple weeks before, and there were a lot of similarities as far as the movie Ransom with the information we had at that time.
Detective Whitson also remembers both Patsy and John, at this stage, remaining relatively calm.
I met with Mr. Ramsey. He was very calm and collected. I only talked to Patsy Ramsey for probably a minute or less. All I did was tell her that we were going to do everything possible to get their daughter back. She basically was sitting it was on the first level, and she was sitting in a chair, and you could tell she had been crying. Detectives and I went up to JonBenet's bedroom, just did a real quick cursory look, shut the door, put crime scene tape over that.
Yes.
Specifically told Mr. Ramsey, nobody goes in that room. I also asked him for samples of his and Mrs. Ramsey's handwriting. He gave me 2 notepads, and I didn't even look at them.
Criminal masterminds, they handed over the notepad to try to trick you also. I mean, The Ramseys, they're fucking slick ones, formidable, if you will.
At that point, we did drive around the area to see if there was anybody suspicious or anybody that looked like it could possibly be involved. I have to tell you that I was told that police officers had searched the house and didn't find anything.
As detectives were about to find...
We searched the house, didn't find anything. That's proof that John Ramsey's a mastermind criminal.
out that initial search had been anything but satisfactory. Even as the house filled with everyone from police to friends of the family, the broken body of little JonBenet was lying behind a door in the basement. Here's Mark McClish.
It is a little bit unusual. Now, they thought they're dealing with a kidnapping because you had a ransom note. But you absolutely want to do a search of the house, which they did, but it was just a cursory search. They didn't search every room, obviously, because they didn't discover her body. The detective asked John Ramsey to
No,
look
look
around
at
and see if
that
anything was missing.
face.
And so he took a friend. They
Look at
started in the
that
basement.
face.
They did, but it was just a cursory search. They didn't search every room, obviously, because they didn't discover her body. The detective asked John Ramsey.
So I gotta believe you made this slide. I have to believe that. I have to believe this was made by you. That's too much of a coincidence.
To look around and see if anything was missing. And so he took a friend. They started in the
Fuck, I can't stop seeing George Cruz here.
basement.
George W. Cruz. It's killing me. George W. Cruz.
I guess started in the basement, worked their way up. But that's when John Ramsey, he went into a room. It was a room that had no windows. And that's where John Ramsey found JonBenet's body.
Our team has spoken exclusively to John Ramsey about that terrible morning.
Well, it was at first a relief. Oh my God, I found her. It was just a flood of thankfulness. And then I pretty quickly realized that she wasn't alive. And I just screamed, carried her upstairs. I didn't, I don't know. And of course, I was criticized for disturbing the crime scene. What would you do? Oh, it's my daughter. I'm not going to touch her because I don't want to disturb the crime scene. That is insane. That would have been suspicious. Yeah, no kidding. Big time. And yet, the police thought that was bizarre. And
Yeah, no more bizarre than the fucking detective who didn't find the body doing exactly what you did.
media criticized me for disturbing the
The
crime
rich.
scene. It's just insane.
Local news reporter Paula Woodward covered the case from the start.
I was an investigative reporter for 25 to 30 years at KUSA TV. Her father discovered the body, which was what was so strange. The Boulder Police Department really mishandled it because they just didn't know how to do it.
Ah, see, now here is the way it makes more sense to me. Instead of laying blame on not knowing proper police protocol on John Ramsey, why don't we primarily place the blame on the H.W. Cruz? Why don't we place the blame in their advertising slide, the one you like, and added the crappy cutout images over? Okay, word. That's funny. It had your fingerprints all over it. But like, seriously, how come the media is less curious about the cops not following protocol than they are suspicious of the father of the child not following police protocol?
Do it. They left after ascertaining that they didn't think she was in the house. They did a cursory search, and her father was told by the one detective in the house, "Hey, why don't you..."
I fucking love it. That is the perfect picture of how I feel about her. Like that is just awesome. That is just awesome.
"Look around, see if anything's out of place," which is so strange. So he went to the basement with a friend, and he found her body. And it was just in talking with him, what a terrible thing as a parent to find your murdered child's body.
I can't imagine.
This is Detective Robert Whitson.
Then when the call came in that they had found JonBenet's body, I and another detective drove to the Ramseys' house. And when I walked in the front door, people were standing immediately inside the door. There's like a foyer area on the first level. I remember Mrs. Ramsey was holding JonBenet. It was like a mother's wail. She was just crying.
Wait, what?
Like a foyer area on the first level. I remember Mrs. Ramsey was holding JonBenet.
420. Can somebody clear that up for me? What? Wait, what? This is the first time I've ever heard anybody say Patsy was sitting there holding JonBenet when the other detectives got there. Nobody's ever said that. This is wild.
It was like a mother's wail. She was just crying profusely. We asked the minister.
Is this real though? Like, I never heard that she picked her up and held her. I don't think. She said put her cheek next to her.
He would ask her to put JonBenet down. She laid the body down. I remember them having to assist her into the other room. She was basically just so distraught and limp. It was hard for her to even walk on her own power.
If discovering the body of your 6-year-old child isn't terrible enough, the horror was compounded by the sickening injuries JonBenet had sustained. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht and former sheriff's investigator John
Cyril Wecht can eat every dick on the planet, but only if he doesn't like eating dicks. I mean, it's all so crazy. Would they have other shit to do? The 211 crew? Oh, I gotta get into this. You're killing me.
San Augustine. Talk us through those injuries in what may, for some listeners, be upsetting detail.
The findings at
I don't know who
autopsy
they are.
revealed
I've
a
never heard
rope
of it.
around the neck, and one end of that rope was tied to a loop around the right wrist. There was a fracture on the top of the skull, about 7.5, 8 inches in length, frontal to occipital. That means from the front of the skull, the forehead region, to the rear part of the skull.
There were 2 stun gun marks found on her face and on her back, of which both
So we can ignore him because he didn't say the Ramseys did it.
injuries were very similar.
Further pathological findings noted by...
Well, he definitely carried her upstairs. But when you hear the other people say it, he dragged her upstairs. Like, it's subtle, but he didn't drag her upstairs. He carried her upstairs in his arms. He didn't like fucking, what is it, Pigpen with the fucking, or whoever Linus drags the blanket behind him. That's not how he brought JonBenet up. He brought JonBenet up in his arms.
The coroner included chronic inflammation of the lining of the vaginal wall called the vaginal mucosa, very delicate lining.
There were some wood fibers that were found inside her vaginal bowl, indicating that she had been sexually assaulted. So when you put just that piece together, somebody had stun gunned her, somebody had sexually assaulted her, somebody had strangled her, and then...
It is plausible, right? That a family member was abusive. It's plausible. I don't think so, but it's plausible. It's also interesting that they say if this thing happened on a previous time, it would have been on the 23rd, which is the day of their party, correct? So somebody could have done this to JonBenet on the 3rd at that party, unbeknownst to anybody.
Somebody subsequently had used some blunt object to strike her head, cracking those 2 occipital lobes.
Boulder, please. We're no longer dealing with a kidnapping.
I mean,
They were
let's
dealing-
not forget Larry Nassar got away with this shit with parents in the room. Larry Nassar for years got away with this shit with those young girls' parents in the fucking room with them while he was doing it.
With the sexual assault, torture, and murder of an innocent 6-year-old girl. And from the start, it seems detectives in this sleepy, peaceful town were completely unable to cope.
Huh.
No one of those investigators had any homicide experience. Everyone on that case probably...
Yeah, I don't know much about our prisons or any of that shit.
7 or 8 of them initially, none of them had homicide experience.
Gotcha.
And logic would dictate to you, you need
Was the hymen broken on the attack?
somebody with homicide experience. They didn't have it.
As John San Augustine, who would later investigate the case alongside Detective Lou Smith, explains to Doug Longini, Many of the later problems and controversies that have dogged the case spring from the initial blunders made by the Boulder police force.
When you're doing an investigation, much like this, where the initial call is a kidnapping, it is crucial that the crime scene, in our terms in the law enforcement profession, we use a term called forensic sterility. And what that means is that you try to maintain that crime scene as best you can in the event that somebody either left something or took something. And so what happens in this case is that we have a major contamination of the crime scene, because not only do we not remove the family from the crime scene when the call comes in, we actually allow the family to introduce into the crime scene their friends, their past.
Yo, there's a weird irony, yo. There's a weird irony. I want to show you this. This is a weird connective irony. This guy, right? Followed by one person that I follow on Twitter. Fucking Frank Zeller. How about that? There's an interesting connection.
Pastor is allowed to come into the crime scene. So there was never any real security of the crime scene at the onset of this investigation. To compound the problem even further, what happens is that law enforcement asks a potential suspect who should have been separated and placed in a car in question to go look for things out of the ordinary. That should have been the role of either the investigators or the crime scene techs who would have been processing that scene. But instead, John Ramsey is the one that then, provides that contamination, that additional contamination, of which is why this case, 23 years later, is still unsolved, because of all of the screw-ups that happened in the onset of this investigation.
George Santos sounds a bit irritated.
The problems were compounded when reports of the little girl's brutal death reached the media. Suddenly, JonBenet Ramsey was a household name around the world. Here's local reporter and author of We Have Your Daughter, Paula Woodward.
By the Monday following her body being found on the prior Thursday, that Monday, the networks were already involved. It all happened so fast, and it was so competitive. And all of a sudden, boom, the networks were there. And within a few days, we learned that the networks were interested. Her child beauty pageant pictures had been leaked and sold to the media by the photographers who took them. And it was just out of control chaos. Here was this beautiful little girl in child beauty pageant pictures, and that didn't go over well. It was immediate. Once the national media was there, that it became international. It happened very, very fast. Little girl murdered, found in her home. Note left that she was kidnapped, but she wasn't. She was murdered. There are child beauty pageant pictures.
Frank Zeller was he's the one talking about the two poems. He's the one that when I did the podcast on the two poems and True Crime Garage, I think it is, interviews Zeller. So it was funny because I did the episode and Frank responded saying, you should check this out if you want more information, which was literally the podcast I was using for the information. So this is a funny interaction.
And video, and everybody throughout the world was there.
Obviously, somebody, one or more people,
Well,
were giving.
The Zeller brothers, there's a they have a website. Fuck, what's it called? In the Zeller or something like that.
The news media information. Some of it was accurate, some of it was inaccurate.
The media certainly was not at its best. This murder happened during the Christmas holidays when more of your experienced reporters are on vacation.
Oh, can we stop using that excuse? It was Christmas. That's why the Boulder police and the media fucked it. They shit the pig.
And so a lot of inexperienced reporters were on the case when the murder first happened, and it continued that way.
A huge part of what made the murder so gruesomely fascinating for the press were several bizarre details that lay at the heart of the case.
No, right. Oh, Zell brothers. Yeah, my bad. But it is in the Zeller or something like that. Right? Their tagline is Zeller.
A ransom note had
But
been
Zell
left
brother, oh well.
at the
whatever.
scene. Not just a ransom note, but a
Too
2.5
many
page
names.
ransom note, printed fairly neatly, with just strange things in it.
Doug Longini and Jameson believe the ransom note is still one of the most valuable pieces of evidence we have.
Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed. And if you want to see her in 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are...
None of this jives, but I can now. I'm starting to see a scenario where this happens. Okay. Like, let's imagine, even though it's against my better judgment, let's imagine that there is a ring of pedos. Okay. And let's imagine they pre-wrote this letter, right? They pre-wrote the letter. And they believed they were just going to assault the child. So they were going to assault the child and actually kidnap her. But the plan doesn't go as planned. And they panic, so they hide the body and leave the note. It still would make sense that those people knew the family. It would make sense that those people probably knew the house. So, like, I can see a scenario where there could have been the pre-planning of a kidnapping with things going wrong during whatever they decided to do. Still, the letter is fucking nonsense. Like, it's nonsense. I hope. But that crazy guy has me worried now.
You are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. It's signed Victory SBTC.
Yeah, it is a bizarre note, but I think that it's an important note because Lou used to say it's a gift the killer left behind because it's part of what his brain thought, part of who he is. That he would sit down and he would write this note, this particular note. Everything in it was important to Lou, and I think it's important now.
But things got even stranger when it was found that the ransom note had been written on paper from a notepad inside the house. Former Deputy U.S. Marshal and statement analysis expert...
That is no more curious to me than the tape came from outside of the house. This shit drives me nuts. It's so selective, but it's like, it is built into the story of how they did this. Like, I know you have to talk about that it comes from there and that it is an important detail. But every time I hear it, I hear so many people that have framed it that somehow means somebody in the family did it because that thing was in the house. It's almost like triggering to me.
Mark McClish has pored over the details of that note for over 2 decades. He explains several other oddities in its language and content.
So triggered.
The first thing I noticed before even analyzing a note is that it was very long, like 2.5 pages long. ransom notes are very short. You know, we have your daughter. This is how much money we want. We'll be in contact. But this note, as I mentioned, went on for 2.5 pages, and it contained information you generally don't find in a ransom note, such as make sure you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank, telling the Ramseys to be ready.
Almost everything in the note made no sense, or you wouldn't see in a ransom note.
Arrested. That stuff just doesn't appear in legitimate ransom notes. And then we also have to remember that the note was written on their stationery with their pen in their house. Now, most kidnappers write the ransom note ahead of time, and then they bring
Yeah,
the note.
that's what I'm saying. That's why the focus on that it was her pad shouldn't implicate the family. Like, it no more, again, everything that they claim that implicates the family, or they frame in most media that it implicates the family, or these people want to frame that it implicates the family, it's as equally non-implicating as they can make it implicating. Like, are you telling me you could break into a house that doesn't have a pen and a notepad? Like, you literally could break into a house like that and there wouldn't be pen and a notepad. In the days of a landline, especially. Like, come the fuck on, dude.
With them, this person entered their residence while they were out to dinner that night, found some paper, wrote this ransom note, and waited for them to return home.
He looks for pen and paper in the middle of the night. He finds it. He starts to write a ransom note. Doesn't like the beginning of it because he knows one day it'll be a communication of great interest. He starts again.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Whether it was written, I don't believe it was written after the murder. Which, if I don't believe it was written after the murder, then I guess I have to accept there is a plausibility that it wasn't an intentional murder. That it was something else. What that something was, I don't know. Somebody could have been intending to kidnap them and panic, but I had said up till now that there's no way it could be a kidnapping. But, like, I can see a scenario where the letter was written beforehand, and if it wasn't completely written to be a lie, then maybe it was real, and they just didn't go as planned. I don't know.
We represent a small foreign faction.
Another strange detail was the amount of money the supposed
maybe they were supposed to just leave out the out the door at the pantry, but they panicked. Like, not even the hardest of criminal could have written that after. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. So, plus, like, unless you're wearing like a full bodysuit, you'd be like sweaty. Your hands would be sweaty. You might have gloves on, but I don't know. Like, you probably didn't have gloves on because there was touch DNA that was foreign. So, like, I don't know. I've never really believed it could have been a kidnapping, but if the letter obviously was written before the event, then I don't know.
kidnappers of JonBenet were demanding for her return.
What if it literally, like, seriously, what would you do? What would you do if it turned out to literally be a small foreign faction?
Woodward explains.
In the ransom note, the 2.5-page ransom note, there was a specific demand for money, $118,000, which was just very strange, very mysterious, added to the mystery of this crime. Why would someone ask for $118,000? And initially, the police leaked that John Ramsey had received a bonus that year in that amount. John Ramsey was a millionaire. And here's this ransom note.
Now, do you see the date? This is the thing. And you made the slide once solved, so you obviously see it. But they make like this Christmas bonus was part of the Christmas season. The motherfucking bonus was paid in February.
Bonus that year in that amount. John Ramsey was.
But also, we don't know that the police leaked it. The person that put it in the note could have leaked it.
Millionaire. And here's this ransom note asking for the return of his daughter for $118,000. It didn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense.
Now, everything a person says has a meaning, and there's a reason why they used $118,000. I mean, first of all, it's a very low amount. I mean, I believe the Ramseys at that time were worth maybe $6 million. So $118,000 is a very low amount. We expect them to say $1 million, maybe $500,000.
The first thing that Lou Smith said to District Attorney Alex Hunter was that note was written before the murder, and I'll tell you
Let's go.
why nobody, after doing that heinous crime, could sit down and write that calm of a letter. Even the most hardened criminal would be on it.
Fuck Cyril Weck. He's a piece of shit. Soaked in bleach documentary supports all the evidence. Ordinary sleuths found out about Kurt Cobain murder. I just don't like him. I don't like him.
Adrenaline rush and anxious to get out of there. And yes, it is a long ransom note, but it is by far not the longest. And in a study of ransom notes that I did, it's not uncommon for ransom notes to be over a page or to say what denomination of money they want. What is unique to this note is all of the references to moving lines, and that would tell us something about the author of the note that should not be overlooked.
Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht outlines the case against the intruder theory.
This intruder knows how to get into the house there in Boulder without causing any disturbance.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild.
He knows where the little girl's bedroom is. He's able.
Dude, he looks like the kind of guy that you would scare off with garlic. Duggar. Is that one of the Duggar kids?
Able to awaken her, take her from her room without causing any disturbance. Now get this picture. Having had his perverted.
His suicide note? Yeah. Yeah.
Sexual pleasure with the little girl, he decides he's going to kill her, and then he's going to write a ransom note. They forgot to bring pen and paper. He didn't even bring the rope. The rope is from material right there in the house. He forgot JonBenet Ramsey's body. You just wrote a ransom note demanding money. You went to all of this trouble. You had the behavioral strength and control to accomplish all of this in the dead of the night, so you're not flustered or hurried. You're doing all of this stuff. And now you've written the note demanding this money, and then you leave. You don't take the body.
Somehow, that is more suspicious than the Ramseys being able to do it. An actual criminal being able to do this and get away with it is crazy. But the Ramseys doing it by accident, not being criminals and getting away with it, that's the most logical answer. Right, Cyril? Fucking asshole.
The body, put it in the back of your car, throw it in the sewer, throw it in the forest, throw it in the woods, throw it in the river, throw it in the lake, do whatever you want to.
Suddenly, John and Patsy Ramsey, after losing their daughter in the most horrific of circumstances, found themselves
is that true about Clinton? Interesting.
and suspects in her murder.
John Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, Burke Ramsey, and JonBenet Ramsey were the only known people in the house when her body was found. With homicides, one of the first things detectives do is they look at who's in the area, who's near the scene, or who's in the home, if that's where it happened. And so they looked at John and Patsy Ramsey, but it, in my opinion, got way out of control in that it seemed that John and Patsy Ramsey were the only ones they were looking at for her daughter's murder.
Here's fellow detective John San Augustin, who outlines
I think he wrote a JFK book too, didn't he?
just a few of the reasons why Lou Smith believed an intruder killed JonBenet.
Imagine being a coroner who's best known as a public figure.
Typically, in my experience, and I've probably investigated well over a few hundred death investigations, I would tell you that when you're looking at a murder like this,
So he's done over a few hundred. Lou solved almost 200. And those two need to be ignored for the people that don't investigate homicides. It's so dumb that that's the narrative the media went with.
the parents typically, if the parents are involved, they either say it was something that was an accident. They may say something like, I struck them, but never have I seen in my career anything where a stun gun, strangulation, and a blow to the head all happened, as well as a sexual assault. They can find no prior application of the...
Look, just because somebody does a lot of shitty things doesn't mean they might not be right sometimes. That we talked about that.
Rope that was used to strangle JonBenet, meaning they found no other.
Fuck, I still listen to R. Kelly. I'll listen to Michael Jackson. Fuck, I'll watch the Cosby Show.
Rope in the house matching the rope that was used to strangle her. The tape that was used to put over her mouth, there was no prior application of that tape found anywhere in the home either. Why would the parents, if they were planning on killing their daughter, why would they take her from her bedroom, sexually assault her, stun gun her twice, strangle her, and then subsequently strike her head, and then stage her body in the basement in a cellar, and then go write a ransom note?
Right.
None of that made sense.
Yeah. That's why I assume he wrote a book on that shit too.
In her 23 years reporting on and conducting her own investigation into the case, Paula Woodward has come to know JonBenet's father, John Ramsey, very well.
John Ramsey has a very deep faith, in spite of everything that has happened to him.
Well, that's also part of why I don't like him.
His daughter's murder has become his life.
I don't like delusional people. They scare me.
But he also has made sure.
But you don't drink Bud Light, do you? Did you see the Kid Rock thing? Did you see the Kid Rock thing with the Bud Light?
That he has time in his life for Burke and his two other children, John Andrew and Melinda. That's very important to him. He is remarried to a wonderful woman after Patsy died in the early 2000s. John.
Dude, that Laura Ingraham segment was fucking golden.
John believes her killer will be found. He doesn't know how, he doesn't know when, he doesn't know where, but that is part of his belief of faith. And I guess that's the best way I can express it. I think it's critically important.
How can you believe that God wants the killer found? You'd have to believe God wanted her killed. Like how the suspension of disbelief. God wants her killer found. If God cared, God wouldn't have let her killers kill her.
That any possible leads are checked out.
That line was
if
killer.
Someone has the courage and tenacity to do so. This is such an important case.
Yeah, look at you with like the ARG type fucking screenshot.
Express it. I think it's critically important that any possible leads are checked out.
I like it. I like it. The little quick ARG screenshot.
If someone has the courage and tenacity to do so. This is such an important case because of all that went wrong with it. Anyone who does something to further the investigation on this case should be lauded. It's really important. And somebody knows something.
I think one of the big questions in this case is if the family did not do it, who did, right? Is it an intruder? Are there other suspects out there that could have been involved in this? Are there other suspects that need to be looked at? Absolutely. Should there be other suspects, DNA's collected? Absolutely. And the problem in this case is that law enforcement was so focused
Not
on the
so
family
subtle anymore,
that they
I
never
guess.
allowed themselves to truly investigate the facts of this case. Still today, there are still a number of leads that have never been followed up by law enforcement.
Next time on the killing of JonBenet, the final
John's daughter from it. You mean Beth? I thought it was just a car accident.
The few people who are left in the Boulder Police Department still believe that John and or Patsy Ramsey murdered their daughter.
All of the jurors believed that the intruder theory didn't hold water.
and long-buried recordings of police interviews with John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey.
Why did you feel scared? You know, when mom came rushing in.
I felt like something bad.
I mean, look, I've seen the Murdoch family. Anything is possible. What? Say what? Say what? Anything is possible. Anything can happen.
The Killing of JonBenet, The Final Suspects, is hosted by me, Danielle Robay. Executive produced by Dylan Howard and Matt Sprouse, and is a...
Okay, so reminder, that's One Solves channel, 7 p.m. Eastern every Sunday. You can these premiere, you can check them out. I got there right as it was ending. I went back and listened, but I wasn't really listening. I have to re-listen to the thing, honestly. Yeah. Imperfect memory, as all. Okay, so let's Yeah, that's gonna do it. That was an interesting ride about how easy it is for the narrative to be set by the media. And sadly, even when you're trying to look at it objectively, right? You still know all the for like I know how this was being presented objectively, and when you hear, the pad was from her, and why would somebody else do this? Like, you hear the words of nonsense from people that are in charge of protecting this, and it's so frustrating that the media can create such a perception that you should look at this stuff and they ignore all this other stuff that is more compellingly exculpatory than the stuff they're saying is inclusatory. Okay, for your channel, hold on. Let me, hold on. I didn't know you had a channel. I don't think I did. Go to channel. Subscribe. Sweet. Yeah, nice. I'll look through this stuff. And feel free to, oh, you can't get me a link either. Shit. I was going to say you can unlist something and give it to me, but you can't do that if you don't have a way to send it to me anyway. Don't look behind the curtain. Yeah, exactly. It's all so crazy. It's all so crazy. Oh, you don't post new stuff, so I don't need the alert. I don't know if that's copyright. I like the graphic though. It's fucking sweet. 88 fingers, Louis. Nice. So he's like a piano gangster. Cool shit. Yeah. Here, I'll hit the alert. Wait, I'm fucking dumb. I'll hit the alert, so if you upload it, I will know immediately. Fucking dumbass, Kevin. All right, y'all. This was a good one. I will catch up with you. Let's see. Fuck. I have so much stuff I want to do. I want to watch that whole crazy guy's interview. And I got another video that kind of talks about some of that stuff. Because that's like unfolding true crime. It's pretty wild. And then I'll probably, Diddy I'm probably going to do on YouTube. But there's a lot of trial stuff and court case stuff that I want to do over on Twitch. Thursday, I'll be on Twitch. So, yeah, best way is stay in the Discord if you can. All right, y'all, take it easy and go enjoy the rest of your day. See ya.